Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lily James. Lily was born in the coastal town of Saintsue, New South Wales, Australia in May 2002. She was the first child of the close-knit James family and was especially loved by her maternal grandmother, Barbara. Growing up, Lily spent much of her time by the ocean with her younger brother Max, where she developed a passion for swimming and an active lifestyle. Her father, a water polo coach at an Anglican girls' school in Hustville, encouraged her interest in the sport. Those who knew Lily remembered her as a friendly and outgoing person who excelled in her studies and was always willing to help those in need. Her well-rounded personality made her a standout student, and she was widely respected by her peers. With her impressive talent and dedication, Lily succeeded in multiple areas, including academia, sports, and community service. She was also an accomplished performer, participating in her school's theater and dance club. Eventually, Lily's talents caught the attention of organizers from the prestigious Woodford Folk Festival, one of Australia's largest annual events, attracting over 125,000 attendees from around the world. As part of the celebrations, Lily performed a unique monologue from William Shakespeare's Macbeth. Her performance showcased her impressive skills, charisma, and stage presence, earning her a standing ovation and the jury's approval. She achieved second place in the theater category, a remarkable achievement that earned her recognition and a significant prize. In 2018, Lily achieved another milestone when she passed her beginner's driving test. Her athletic talents also flourished, particularly in water polo, a sport she began competing in professionally, following in her father's footsteps. She won the title of swimming champion in the under-17 category, a feat that delighted her parents. By her final year of school, Lily had decided to pursue a career in sports, and in 2020, she enrolled at Sydney Technological University to study sports business management. A turning point in her life. In early 2021, she started a new chapter. To break up her college routine and gain teaching experience, she took a job as a water polo coach at St. Andrew's Cathedral School. Her youthful energy, vibrant personality, and passion for sports quickly won over her colleagues, the school administration, and the students she was coaching. The students looked up to her and tried to meet her high standards. In return, she sought to understand each student's unique needs and strengths. That's when she met Paul, the new cricket and hockey coach. His impressive skills and charismatic presence quickly made him the center of attention. As a part-time teacher at another school and a member of the University of New South Wales hockey team, Paul was a driven and accomplished young man. He was particularly popular among the female students and staff. However, opinions about him were divided. Some saw him as arrogant and stubborn, while others appreciated his positive qualities. Initially, Lily and Paul's interactions were friendly but brief, limited to exchanging greetings. Over time, their relationship evolved into something more. Lily's friends reported that Paul asked her out on a date, and she found it difficult to say no due to his charming smile. The date had a profound impact on both of them, leading to a decision to meet again. As Lily got to know Paul better, she began to develop feelings for him, unaware of his true nature. Her kindness and openness made her vulnerable to falling in love. Paul appeared to return her affection, frequently complimenting her, giving her flowers, and planning evenings together. They decided to keep their relationship a secret, especially from the students at school. Lily and her boyfriend, Paul, had agreed to keep their relationship private, adhering to the school's policy and Lily's personal preference for discretion. However, as time passed, rumors about their relationship began to circulate, evolving from hushed whispers to open discussions. When Lily discovered that Paul was the one who had revealed their relationship, she felt deeply hurt and betrayed. Paul's portrayal of her had also led to criticism and judgment from others, causing Lily to feel humiliated. As a result, she confronted Paul about his actions and ended their relationship. Despite Paul's subsequent attempts to apologize and reconcile, Lily remained resolute in her decision. She took some comfort in the fact that their relationship had been brief, allowing her to see Paul's true nature before things escalated further. Paul was born in 1999 in the Netherlands to a wealthy and influential family. When his father's job required a relocation to Australia in 2015, Paul and his family made the move. As an only child, Paul received excessive attention and care from his parents, which significantly contributed to his character development. Unfortunately, this upbringing led to Paul growing up with an entitled and self-centered attitude. Paul was a high-achieving student who excelled academically, athletically, and was physically fit. After moving to a new location, he attended St. Andrew's Cathedral School, where he joined the cricket team and quickly gained recognition and respect from his peers for his exceptional skills. He eventually became the team captain and actively participated in organizing extracurricular activities and festivals. While he was well-liked by many, particularly they who found him charming, some of his male peers were put off by his confidence and boasts about his ability to win over any girl. Despite this, Paul's charm and charisma earned him many admirers. After graduating in 2017, the school administration offered him a position as an assistant coach for cricket and hockey, which he gladly accepted. He quickly took on a leadership role and successfully managed these sections, feeling confident in his abilities. However, by early 2018, he surprisingly resigned and returned home with his family, citing unknown reasons for his departure. Back home, Paul decided to further his education and earned a master's degree in sports management. Paul had a conversation with old friends and mentioned that he had improved his coaching skills, which led to a job offer from his former employer. He returned to Australia and started working at the familiar school in early 2020. To reduce living expenses, Paul agreed to share an apartment with a friend in Kensington, a suburb of Sydney. Initially, they enjoyed each other's company, socializing after work. However, a few months later, they had a disagreement, and Paul decided to live alone. His parents, who he couldn't visit due to the pandemic, felt that Paul was lonely despite being busy and surrounded by people. They weren't aware of any romantic relationships in his life. By the summer of 2021, as Paul resumed his regular activities, people began to notice a change in his behavior and personality. He picked up where he left off in the sports world, regaining his status as a key player on the hockey team and continuing his active lifestyle, even featuring in promotional advertisements. At the same time, those who knew him observed emerging characteristics that were not present before. Uncontrollable outbursts of anger became a concern. Furthermore, rumors circulated within the school community about his unusual interest in his female students. He would often engage in flirtatious behavior with teenage girls, staring at them for extended periods, leaving them visibly uncomfortable and embarrassed. Paul's importance in the hockey team's progress to the Australian Hockey League finals was evident despite the turmoil in his personal life. His recent breakup with Lily was likely a significant blow to his ego. Unexpected, on October 26, 2023, at approximately 4:30 a.m., the principal of St. Andrew's Cathedral School in central Sydney sent an email to students and parents announcing the school's closure until the end of the week due to a critical incident. A tragedy occurred at the school, prompting a thorough investigation. On Thursday and Friday, a 24-hour consultation center was established in the school library to support those affected. Forensic teams meticulously searched the school building and surrounding area, gathering evidence. The gym was closed off, and the adjacent shower area was scheduled for demolition due to the disturbing discovery made there. The incident began to unfold when the body of a 20-year-old woman was found in the shower around midnight. She had been seen alive just hours earlier. The water polo coach had entered the shower but never emerged. Surveillance footage revealed that someone had followed her around 8 p.m., but the pursuer left the area alone, heading towards the school exit. A family member was later asked to identify the body due to severe facial damage. The victim was identified as Lily James. As the police delved deeper into the case, surveillance footage played a crucial role, and the prime suspect, a young man, was caught on camera multiple times. Investigations were launched into Paul and Lily's cell phone records, helping police track the suspect's last known location using GPS. They also sought to recover the victim's phone, hoping to uncover evidence through text messages that could shed light on the events leading up to the crime. After successfully locating the devices, the police reconstructed the sequence of events, revealing that Paul had purchased a hammer from a hardware store just days before the crime. It seemed he was consumed by anger toward the victim and had planned a confrontation. On the morning of October 25th, Lily followed her routine, attending the university and then heading to her job in the afternoon. Unbeknownst to her, her ex-boyfriend had other plans. Paul rented a silver Lexus and drove to the school, avoiding the building since he had no classes scheduled. He waited in the car, patiently biding his time. Once the students cleared out, he walked into the gym, concealing a hammer under his jacket to avoid drawing attention. From this vantage point, Paul observed Lily's movements, lying in wait for the perfect moment to strike. When Lily finished her training session and decided to take a shower, Paul saw his chance and followed her. An argument erupted, and in the heat of the moment, Paul attacked Lily, striking her head with the hammer. According to the pathologists, the impact was fatal, and Lily died instantly, without suffering. After waiting for an hour, Paul collected Lily's belongings and left the building. He then drove to Diamond Bay, where he disposed of the weapon in a trash can. Security cameras captured footage of him at the reserve at 8:47 p.m. His last known location, as tracked by investigators, was the Gap, a cliff in the eastern Sydney suburb of Vaucluse. As the community was still reeling from the initial tragedy, another shocking event occurred. On October 27th, at 8 a.m., shopkeepers at Diamond Bay Reserve in Sydney's eastern suburbs made a disturbing discovery. A man's body was found just 11 miles away from the site of the first crime. A rescue team, including a bomb squad and Marine Corps personnel, was formed to retrieve the body. The body was recovered at 3:30 p.m. and taken for identification. Due to severe injuries, fingerprints were used to identify the individual. The victim was 24-year-old Paul, the same person who had been at the scene of the first crime. The investigation team faced a significant challenge in establishing a connection between the fatal incidents and uncovering the circumstances surrounding the events. The Gap is a notorious location with a history of suicides. Around 10 p.m., Paul used Lily's phone to send a message to her father, possibly revealing the location of her body. An hour later, the young man made a brief emergency call, but hung up quickly. When police arrived at the cliff, they found the personal belongings of Lily and Paul, but there was no sign of him. A rented car was parked nearby, suggesting that he may have taken his own life due to feelings of guilt or fear of facing the consequences of his actions. On October 26th, police launched a search operation for his body, using helicopters and boats to scour the coastline. The first day's efforts were unsuccessful, but the next day, a body was found on rocks in a nearby nature reserve. With Paul deceased, the case was closed, and his parents collected his body, opting to cremate it in Sydney. A meeting was subsequently arranged with Tim Watson-Monro, a renowned forensic psychologist with extensive experience in analyzing the behavior of both criminals and victims. Mr. Watson-Monro was asked to share his insights on the incident and analyze the behavior of the perpetrator, Paul. According to Mr. Watson-Monro, Paul's actions were characteristic of individuals with an inflated sense of self-importance who struggle to accept rejection. He believed that Paul committed the crime in a premeditated and calculating manner, showing no remorse for his actions. When asked about Paul's decision to end his own life, Mr. Watson Monroe provided an explanation. Mr. Watson portrays Paul as a self-centered individual with psychopathic traits. Some have compared the tragic events to the finale of Romeo and Juliet, but the story of Lily and Paul is unique and unfolds in a distinct way. A genuine love relationship cannot thrive with pride, dishonesty, and betrayal. Unfortunately, Paul failed to grasp this, leading him to overlook the value of the person beside him. His decision to prioritize his own wounded ego ultimately resulted in the loss of a bright and vibrant life. This not only caused lasting pain for Lily's family but also for Paul's own loved ones. Regrettably, his actions left a devastating impact on those around him. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Diana Quer. On the morning of August 22, 2016, residents of the small Spanish town of Pobo do Caramal, hurrying to work, discovered flyers posted throughout the town. Dedicated volunteers had tirelessly pasted them on every building. The flyers featured a photograph of a young 18-year-old woman named Diana Quer. The young woman had a very slender build, standing about 6 feet tall. Her black hair, brown eyes, and delicate features made her appearance quite captivating. The evening before her disappearance, she was wearing pink shorts, a t-shirt, a white sweatshirt, and black sneakers. The description said her left home the night before and suddenly disappeared. Since last night, her family, along with volunteers and special services, have been desperately and tirelessly searching for the missing girl in every possible way. They have thoroughly searched every street and explored every corner, hoping to find some trace and bring Diana home. Juan Carlos, Diana's father, was in Madrid but wasted no time in contacting the police to trace the calls from his daughter's phone and find out the last location of her phone. He also contacted the local newspaper and urged residents to help with the search. If you have any information, even the smallest, contact the police. The police need your help, Diana's father reported. Diana's mother, deeply distressed, pleaded with the public, "We are doing everything we can to find Diana, but we still haven't gotten any answers. If you have any information, please help us. We are in a situation where even the slightest rumor can become important and help us find our daughter." Diana Quer was born on August 12, 1998, in Madrid. She was the daughter of Diana Cristina Lopez Pinel Pinjo and Juan Carlo Quer, and had a sister named Valeria. The family was quite wealthy and closely related. However, in 2013, Diana's parents divorced, which greatly affected the sisters. They faced depression and often conflicted over the attention of their mother, who took most of the care of them. Despite this, the father saw his daughters regularly during vacations. Diana, her mother, and sister often visited the small coastal town of Pobo do Caramal, which had a population of around 10,000. In the summer of 2016, Diana's family spent their vacation as usual in the cozy town of Pobo do Caramal. Every summer, they returned here to enjoy the tranquility and beauty of the place. Sunday, August 21st, was expected to be just like any other day. In the evening, around 10, Diana approached her mother and informed her that she was going to lling Park to meet her friends and have fun in celebration of the Feast of the Virgin Carmen. lling Park was not far from the cottage where the family was staying, and it was a place where Diana often walked. Her mother, seeing nothing unusual about this, allowed her to go there again. She spent that evening joyfully with her friends. 4 hours later, Diana said goodbye to her friends and was about to return home, unaware that this would be their final farewell. On her way, she encountered her acquaintance, Pazo de Ariel, not far from the pizzeria where Diana frequently spent time. It was around 2:30 in the morning when they parted ways. Pazo de Ariel was the last person to see Diana on that fateful night. The morning of August 22, 2016, turned into a nightmare for Diana's mother, Maria Quer Lopez Pinel. At 8:30 in the morning, she realized that something was wrong with her daughter. She had not returned home from a party. Her cell phone was either turned off or out of range, which caused alarm. The mother decided not to wait and immediately called the police, reporting her daughter as missing. Based on the information provided by the mother, it could be concluded that Diana did not have any serious emotional or mental health issues, despite a troubled childhood due to her parents' divorce. Her prolonged absence was very unusual and raised serious concerns. Police began to investigate the complex and confusing events surrounding the disappearance of Diana Maria Kerr Lopez Pinel. Investigators had to determine what happened when Diana disappeared without leaving any trace. It turned out that Diana's last messages were sent to a friend of hers from Madrid via WhatsApp. In these messages, she wrote about a certain stranger who was stalking her and shouting strange phrases, scaring her. These messages were Diana's last contact with the outside world. She no longer responded to the messages, although they had been read. The next day, the police began to retrace the route Diana had to take to get home. It was along the road that they found a black hairband that looked very similar to the one Diana had been wearing that night. This was the only item recovered from the scene of her disappearance, but investigators had no other evidence. Diana's friends were unable to provide any helpful information, and there were no CCTV cameras on the final part of her journey. The street was dimly lit and sparsely populated, with just a few garages and a rundown Boomerang nightclub lining the road. Some witnesses reported seeing Diana get out of a car with 3 other people and then move to a different car that drove her away from the port. However, these accounts were not confirmed. Investigators considered 2 main hypotheses. The first suggested that Diana was kidnapped by someone she might have known, while the second linked her disappearance to a potential attack by a mentally unstable individual. Diana's mother even proposed a third scenario in which her daughter could have been taken away on a boat. Diana's friend and ex-boyfriend reported that she met a man from Morocco, and together they purchased hashish. However, this information only complicated the picture of her disappearance. An important point was the media reports about the discovery of the clothes Diana wore that evening. But her mother denied this information, claiming that no clothes were found. Additionally, her credit card and identification were left in the house, so Diana could not have simply run away, leaving all her belongings and documents behind. This fact and other circumstances confirmed that her disappearance was not voluntary. Nevertheless, the case remained mysterious and could not be solved. Shortly after Diana's disappearance, the press reported on the quarrel that had occurred between Diana and her mother just a few days before the tragic event. The media claimed that Diana had suffered a nervous breakdown that required medical attention, and that her younger sister Valeria had also been hospitalized with similar symptoms. To prevent further litigation and conflict, the custody rights to the younger sister were transferred to the father on Thursday, September 5th. This was a preventive measure to avoid further strife in the local community, which was already gripped by an unsettling atmosphere over Diana's disappearance. The father and his daughter left town, and rumors began to spread that the family was hiding something significant. According to Diana's friends, running away from home was a common occurrence for the sisters, especially for her younger sister Valeria, who was only 16 years old. The family dynamics were complicated, and arguments between the mother and the daughters were not uncommon. This information became public, and the immediate question that arose was, why was the mother so anxious when Diana didn't return home if her had frequently left home before? On Wednesday, August 31st, Diana's parents did not show up for a scheduled press interview where they were scheduled to provide details about the investigation. The family lawyer explained that the parents were emotionally devastated at the thought that they might never see their daughter again. The newspaper El Mundo published an article on September 11th that shed light on other aspects of the family's life. It said the mother's statement that Diana did not have mental problems was contradicted by information about her disappearance in April. during which time Diane left home for 3 days and her mother did not contact the police. She would turn off her phone to anger her mother and said she no longer wanted to live with her. Letters written by Diana and Valeria to each other also appeared in the press, from which it became clear that both sisters were going through serious emotional problems. Valeria has even been hospitalized several times over the past year, once having to have her stomach pumped due to an overdose of prescription drugs. In the absence of progress in the investigation into Diana's disappearance, prosecutors have launched an investigation into the abuse of the Lopez family's youngest daughter, Valeria. The investigation into Diana's disappearance continues to be intense and is moving at full speed. Forensic experts seized several items belonging to her, including a toothbrush, a comb, a personal computer, her diary, and some prescription medications. These items were subjected to a thorough analysis. Investigators then began questioning Diana's acquaintances, including a young Moroccan man with whom Diana had a brief affair. All of these measures failed to yield the desired results, and further police searches remained unsuccessful. The police conducted extensive searches in the mountains, forests, rivers, and lakes near the site of the disappearance. However, it appears that Diana disappeared around 3 a.m., and the last signal from her phone was found in the Tarragon area, 13 miles from where the family was staying. 72 days after her disappearance, Diana K's case remained a mystery, as none of the investigators' leads have yet been confirmed. In addition to a hairband, police found a cell phone that matched the description of Diana's phone, and her father confirmed that it was his daughter's cell phone 2 months after her disappearance. Diana's Facebook profile was suddenly active, and friends and relatives immediately notified the police and provided screenshots. It turned out that the Remember Password function had been used to avoid entering profile login details, leaving 2 theories. Either Diana had forgotten her password, or the attacker was trying to gain access to her profile. Diana's phone was a crucial piece of evidence in the case, but it failed to provide any insight into the mysterious disappearance. On November 10, 2016, the driver of the very car in which Diana was last seen was finally identified. The man had previously been detained on charges of human trafficking, and information about his potential involvement in Diana's disappearance was kept secret for a long time, so as not to disrupt the ongoing investigation. His wife claimed that he was with her that night, which initially excluded him from the list of suspects. However, on December 25, 2017, an incident occurred that became a pivotal point in the investigation. One of hers was attacked by a man demanding her phone and threatening her with a weapon. The terrified victim screamed, and a couple passing by came to her aid, rescuing her from the thug who tried to pull her into a car. The shaken victim immediately contacted the police, providing a description of the perpetrator and his license plate number. The next morning, police arrested 41-year-old Jose Enrique Abinay, who was also known as Elo. The man already had a criminal past. The police immediately discovered that Jose Enrique was the same driver who had been detained in 2016 on suspicion of kidnapping Diana. However, he was released at the time because the police believed the alibi provided by his wife. The police questioned the suspect and his wife again, and as a result of the interrogation, the wife admitted that she had previously lied, and that in fact, on the night of Diana's disappearance, her husband had been out of the house and did not return until 4 a.m. Jose Enrique was eventually forced to admit that he accidentally hit Diana on the road and then was afraid to go to the police, which is why he decided to dispose of the body. However, he later changed his version of events, confessing to kidnapping and killing Diana. According to him, he came to the seashore to pick up gasoline from abandoned cars, and it was there that he saw Diana. Jose kidnapped her, tried to force her to have sexual intercourse, and then strangled her. This shocking truth revealed new details about the case and confirmed that Diana K. Lopez's disappearance was the result of a horrific crime. The disappearance of Diana K. Lopez was a long and traumatic experience for her family and everyone following the case. Nearly 500 days of investigation and continuous media speculation only added to the anguish of her loved ones. The accusations directed at Diana's parents only served to confuse and impede the investigation. Despite this, through persistent investigation and the testimony of a second victim, investigators were able to gather the necessary evidence and find the perpetrator. Diana will be remembered by her loved ones as a bright and vivacious young woman who was unlucky enough to find herself in the path of a violent criminal. Her story serves as a reminder of how important it is to unite in the difficult moments of fighting crime, to end impunity, and ensure the safety of all citizens. Unfortunately, the perpetrator did not admit for a long time where he hid Diana's body, but later, family and friends managed to say goodbye to Diana and give her a proper burial. The body was found in the well of an abandoned warehouse in January 2018. Jose was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 35 years. El Chicle was initially held at the A Lama and Teixeiro prisons in Galicia, but was later transferred to the Vilo prison near León to avoid potential retaliation from former associates and rivals in the cocaine trade. His prison correspondence showed no signs of remorse, and he even tried to implicate his ex-wife in the murder. At Villa Hierro, he became a dominant figure, and his fellow inmates included David Ubel, another Galician from Moranya, who was the first person to be sentenced to life imprisonment since the reintroduction of this sentence in 2015. The missing person case and the subsequent murder trial received extensive media coverage. Some news outlets were criticized for relying on morbid fascination or sensationalism in their reporting. In October 2019, the same program was condemned by Cuer's family for broadcasting an alleged last photograph of the murder victim, as the relatives believed it was implying that her clothing was responsible for her death. Some authors believe that Cuer's case received disproportionate media coverage because she was young, wealthy, and female. In contrast, the case of Ivan Duran, a 30-year-old man from nearby Bayona who went missing 3 days later, did not receive as much attention. Duran's father said that the police resources were disproportionately focused on the search for Cuer. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lisa Valdez. Lisa Valdez was born on September 6, 1961 in San Francisco, California. She had a brother and a loving mother, although their father was not involved in their lives. Despite this, Lisa was exceptionally close to her mother, and they almost never argued. Everyone who knew them was always impressed by how perfect their relationship seemed. In her teenage years, Lisa took up dancing, and it became one of her greatest passions. She also had a keen interest in modern technology, getting into the IT field when it was still in its infancy. For instance, she started using email when most of her friends hadn't even heard of it. This interest in technology shaped her future career. After college, Lisa got a job as a software analyst in San Francisco. Later, her mother used her savings to purchase Lisa an apartment in a prestigious neighborhood. It was a small studio, but the building was situated on a hill, offering a beautiful view of the city. Lisa lived in this apartment alone, advancing in her career and spending as much time as possible with her family. She also continued dancing, attending weekly dance practice sessions with her best friend. On May 16, 1998, when Lisa was 36, she invited her mother and some family friends over for the evening. After the guests left, her mother helped with the dishes and headed home. Before she left, Lisa promised to call her the next day, but she never called. At first, her mom figured she was just busy, as Lisa was supposed to go to dance practice that day, so her mom decided to wait. But the whole day went by without hearing from Lisa. The next day, she tried calling Lisa herself, but there was no answer. The mother kept trying to reach her daughter, but Lisa never picked up. On the fourth day, which was a Monday, Lisa's colleagues contacted her mother and informed her that Lisa had not reported to work and was not answering their phone calls. This was highly unusual, as Lisa was a responsible employee who had never missed work without notice. Concerned, her mother decided to go to Lisa's apartment complex to check on her. However, upon arrival, she noticed police tape surrounding the building and a significant police presence. When she inquired about the situation, the police explained that just a few hours earlier, residents had reported a strange odor coming from one of the apartments. The manager had gone to investigate and found the door unlocked, immediately discovering a body on the floor, prompting the call to the police. The officers quickly identified the deceased as Lisa. She was partially undressed, and her body showed clear signs of trauma, indicating it was a murder. Based on the state of decomposition, they estimated she had been dead for several days. The police also suspected she had been assaulted, as her underwear was found next to the body. The room was covered in blood stains, both on the floor and on the bed. The TV was on, and the air conditioner was set to 78 degrees. The apartment was also in disarray, but detectives later discovered that this was normal for Lisa, who wasn't meticulous about keeping things tidy. There were no signs of a robbery, as all of Lisa's valuables, including her jewelry, were left in plain sight. The only things missing were her keys and a gym bag. Another peculiar detail was that the attacker had cut off some of Lisa's long hair and taken it with them. Combined with the numerous injuries on her body, this suggested the presence of strong personal motives. Detectives speculated that the killer might have known Lisa, and for some reason, harbored hatred towards her, supporting the idea that Lisa was familiar with her attacker. This was further supported by the lack of signs of forced entry, and the fact that Lisa's apartment complex was fenced and required either a key or access granted by a resident. The police started interviewing residents of the complex, hoping someone had seen the attacker, and they quickly found their first lead. One of Lisa's neighbors mentioned that 2 days earlier, after returning from vacation, he noticed part of the metal frame of his front door was bent, and there was a faint blood stain on the door. He reported it to the manager, but they decided not to involve the police since it was clear no one had broken into his apartment. Detectives were almost certain the same person who killed Lisa was responsible for this incident, but the motives behind the actions were unclear. Perhaps the killer tried to break into the neighbor's apartment and was caught by Lisa, leading to her murder. According to another theory, the attempt to break into the neighbor's apartment might have occurred after Lisa's murder, which seemed odd. Detectives also talked to the housekeeper who cleaned Lisa's apartment every week. 2 days before they found Lisa's body, the housekeeper used her key to enter the complex and tried to open Lisa's door, but it was blocked from the inside. She peeked through the crack and saw a partially undressed woman on the floor and heard a man's voice. Assuming she was interrupting something private, she left right away. The police believed Lisa was already dead by then, and the man's voice belonged to her killer who was still in the apartment. The housekeeper mentioned seeing a black bag with a zipper near the body, but she was unsure as she only glanced at it briefly. Additionally, there was an untouched envelope with cash taped to the inside of Lisa's apartment door. This money was intended for the housekeeper, as Lisa would leave it the day before her scheduled visit since she wouldn't be home. The presence of the untouched envelope suggests that Lisa was likely attacked after her mother's departure, between midnight and early morning, as this was when she would have left the money. This theory was soon confirmed by the neighbors living on the floor below, who reported hearing noises from above that night. They described hearing thumping sounds followed by the sound of someone coming down the stairs, though they did not see who it was. While medical experts examined Lisa's body, detectives continued searching her apartment for clues. They soon noticed something unusual. The toilet seat was up, which was unusual for a woman living alone. Forensic experts examined the toilet seat and found a partial fingerprint that did not belong to Lisa. The police collected fingerprints from all of Lisa's acquaintances and relatives who might have been in her apartment, but none matched this. This led detectives to believe the fingerprint might belong to the killer. The medical experts soon finished their report, giving a new lead. Lisa's body had over 20 stab wounds, but because of the decomposition, they couldn't tell if she had been sexually assaulted. However, they found defensive wounds on her body, indicating that Lisa tried to fight off her attacker. The experts also found skin particles under her nails, likely from the killer, and sent them to the lab for analysis. Meanwhile, forensic experts examined evidence from the apartment and found a crucial clue. One of the pillowcases had numerous blood stains, but analysis revealed that not all the blood belonged to Lisa. Some stains were different, so the pillowcase was sent to the lab for further examination. Investigators theorized that the killer might have accidentally injured himself while stabbing Lisa, which was common in such cases since a knife can easily slip. This theory was supported by another finding inside the toilet. They discovered 2 bandages from a first aid kit, which the killer might have used to stop his bleeding. He also could have left his fingerprints on the toilet seat while throwing away the bandages. DNA analysis showed that the blood on the pillowcase belonged to an unknown man not in the FBI database. The skin particles from under Lisa's nails also matched this man, as did the blood stain on her knee. Although there were no matches in the DNA database, detectives now had the killer's DNA profile. They began comparing it with samples from suspects in their system who had committed crimes in Lisa's area, and also started looking closely at her acquaintances. Lisa's mother revealed that Lisa had been dating a man named Albert Kiddo, and they were supposed to go on a date the day after the murder. However, Kiddo had canceled it just a few days prior. Detectives brought Kiddo in for questioning and immediately noticed a large cut on his hand. They suspected that the killer might have injured his hand while stabbing Lisa, and this is common in such attacks. This immediately made Kiddo a suspect, but he denied any involvement in the murder. The detectives took his fingerprints and DNA samples and sent them to the lab for comparison. To their surprise, none of it matched the blood on the pillowcase and the skin particles from under Lisa's nails, clearly belonging to someone else. Investigators continued searching for other possible suspects and decided to listen to the messages on Lisa's answering machine left in the days leading up to the murder. They compiled a list of 40 callers, but one strange message stood out to them. Just a few hours before the murder, while Lisa still had guests at her home, a man called her, but she didn't pick up, so he left a rather unusual message. You know how it goes. Hey Lisa, are you home? The police played this message for Lisa's friend, who immediately recognized the voice as belonging to a colleague of Lisa's named Albert Robinson. He had repeatedly expressed romantic feelings for Lisa, but she wasn't interested in a relationship with him. They continued to interact at work and in the company of mutual acquaintances, and Lisa considered him a friend. Several days after the murder, during the victim's family's memorial service, something else happened. Robinson showed up and gave a speech that puzzled everyone present. He claimed that he and Lisa were deeply in love, planning to get married and start a family. However, Lisa's friends and her mother stated that Robinson's words were completely untrue. Lisa had told them that Robinson had shown interest in her, but she had no romantic feelings for him. Lisa's mother also stressed their close relationship, saying that Lisa wouldn't have hidden such plans from her. Robinson was questioned, where he denied any involvement in the murder. He claimed he loved Lisa and would never harm her. However, he refused to provide his DNA sample and fingerprints to the police. This evidence pointed to Robinson as the main suspect, and detectives continued searching for new leads. If Robinson was obsessed with Lisa and she did not reciprocate his feelings, it could have driven him to commit the crime. The brutality of the crime suggested personal motives, and the fact that the killer had cut off and taken some of her hair could be connected to his obsession. Detectives eventually obtained a search warrant for Robinson's house, where they found numerous photos of Lisa, further indicating his obsession with her. However, Robinson continued to deny any involvement in the murder. He even provided his fingerprints and DNA samples to the detectives. Although the detectives were almost certain that Robinson was the killer, The lab results showed no match between the samples found at the victim's apartment and Robinson's. Consequently, Robinson was removed from the list of suspects, and the police continued their search for new leads. Despite their efforts, the detectives repeatedly hit dead ends, and the case remained unsolved for years. Investigators repeatedly sought updates on the comparison of the killer's DNA sample and fingerprints with databases, hoping that he would surface for some other crimes, but it never happened. Initially, police found it strange that someone who committed such a brutal crime wasn't in the databases, as they doubted it was his first serious offense. Over the following years, police continued to check for matches in the databases, but they always came up empty. Lisa's mother gave interviews on television multiple times, urging anyone with information to come forward. But detectives still couldn't find any new leads. In 2010, detectives learned that the FBI had started using a new DNA technology to compare suspect samples with individuals in the database to locate their relatives. Unlike genetic genealogy, which emerged several years later, this method only worked with close relatives. For example, experts could find the father or a brother of the DNA owner in the database. With no other leads, in 2011, the police requested such a DNA comparison and began waiting. On September 2nd, the lead detective received a call from the FBI with two pieces of news, one good and one bad. They stated they would not perform the comparison with possible relatives in the database, but the reason was quite unexpected. Before conducting such a comparison, experts always retest the suspect's DNA sample, and this time, 13 years after the murder, it came back as a perfect match. The DNA from the blood and skin particles found under Lisa's nails matched the sample from a 52-year-old man named Anthony Hughes, who had just recently entered the FBI database. The man had an extensive criminal history spanning decades, but none of his crimes required his DNA sample to be entered into the FBI database. With changes in laws, criminals in California were required to submit DNA samples regardless of the severity of the crime, and Anthony's sample ended up in the database after he was arrested for a simple shoplifting incident. His fingerprints were also entered into the databases, and they matched the fingerprint found on the toilet seat in Lisa's apartment. Experts even identified the specific finger that left the print. Pretty easily before arresting the man, detectives attempted to find any other evidence that could connect him to the crime. Here, they encountered a surprising turn of events. 13 years ago, the police listened to messages left for Lisa on her answering machine. However, they only reviewed calls made to her phone before the murder. Now, after all these years, detectives suddenly discovered that Anthony Hughes had called Lisa just a day after her death and left her a message. Its content was quite ordinary and did not raise any suspicions. However, had the police investigated Anthony back then, they would have not only discovered his extensive criminal record, but also something else. Upon reviewing Lisa's belongings, detectives examined her address book and found Anthony's phone number, confirming that the victim knew him. After talking to Lisa's friends, the police learned that she had apparently dated Anthony for a while in high school. And now, the detectives had everything they needed to question the man. At that time, he didn't have a fixed address, so they decided to proceed carefully to prevent the suspect from fleeing. They arrested him, saying that the police were investigating a series of robberies in San Francisco, and he surrendered without resistance. During the interrogation, detectives started by asking about a series of robberies before smoothly transitioning to Anthony's criminal record. Eventually, they asked if he knew Lisa Valdez. At first, he said no, but when they showed her photo, he admitted they knew each other from high school. Anthony also claimed he hadn't seen her since the late 80s. Over several hours, detectives questioned him about the relationship and whether he'd seen her recently. Finally, they confronted him about his DNA found in Lisa's apartment in '98. Anthony suddenly began crying and asked for a pen and paper. Thinking he was ready to confess, they handed it over, but to their surprise, the man started hitting himself with the pen. They had to restrain him while he continued crying and shouting that they were trying to frame him for a crime he didn't commit. After that, Anthony was charged with the murder, and detectives informed Lisa's relatives that her killer had finally been caught. However, they had to wait another 4 years before the trial began in court. Anthony initially appeared confident, even arrogant, and smirked. But as the proceedings continued, he began showing up with a Bible in hand and a cross around his neck, which the detectives saw as an attempt to sway the jurors. His lawyer insisted Anthony couldn't physically have committed the murder. He had been diagnosed with a condition 5 years prior that weakened his muscles, making repetitive movements extremely difficult. The lawyer argued that Anthony wouldn't have been able to inflict over 20 stab wounds on the victim. But medical reports from the year of the murder showed that Anthony's condition was under control and treatment was effective. Moreover, the prosecution had much stronger evidence pointing directly to his presence in the victim's apartment. His skin was found under Lisa's nails, his blood on a pillowcase, and his fingerprint on the toilet seat. But despite all this, Anthony continued to insist he hadn't seen Lisa since the late 80s. The prosecution theorized that Anthony contacted Lisa and went to her home, where he attempted to engage in intimacy with her, but she refused. In a fit of rage, he then killed her, cut off a portion of her hair, and took it with him before fleeing the scene. In the end, the jury unanimously found him guilty of first-degree murder. However, there was a problem with convicting him of sexual assault. The prosecution believed Anthony had indeed assaulted the victim, but due to the extent of decomposition, there was no direct evidence to confirm it. The situation was further complicated when, before sentencing, Anthony challenged the assault charges, arguing that the 13-year delay in bringing charges violated his constitutional rights. As a result, the primary charges were reduced from first-degree murder to second-degree murder, resulting in a less severe punishment. Anthony eventually received a life sentence, with the possibility of parole after just 16 years in 2031, when he would be 72. Since then, Anthony has been serving his sentence in prison and continues to maintain his innocence. Lisa's relatives hope that his parole request will be denied, which is quite likely, as often, a refusal to admit guilt is seen by the parole board as a lack of remorse, meaning the offender doesn't deserve to be released. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Justine Valdez. Justine Valdez was born in 1993 in Aritao, a town situated 255 kilometers north of the Filipino capital Manila. She was the only child of Teresita and Danilo Valdez, also known as Tess and Danny. Justine attended St. Teresita's Academy, a Catholic secondary school in her hometown of Aritao. While Teresita and Danilo had moved to Ireland for work, Justine remained in the Philippines with family. In 2015, her parents were able to bring Justine to Ireland, and the family settled in the small village of Enniskerry in County Wicklow, near the Dublin-Wicklow border. After arriving in Ireland, Justine immediately began working, studying, and building a life for herself. She was extremely close to both of her parents and maintained constant contact with them when she wasn't at home. Justine was studying accountancy at IT Talat and worked 2 part-time jobs as a care worker and as a waitress in a cafe in the bustling coastal town of Bray. In November 2017, Justine began a relationship with Joseph Squire. Joseph later described Justine as being happy and active, saying she never got up to any mischief. She was way too innocent for that. He added that she was literally the most innocent person I ever met in my life, and I will never forget her. On May 19, 2018, 24-year-old Justine Valdez spent her afternoon with a routine she was familiar with. After completing paperwork for her residency permit, she went to the gym for a workout, wrapping up around 4:20 p.m. Justine then planned to head home, and her mother, Teres, sent her a quick text asking her to pick up some bread on the way. Justine obliged, making a stop at the store before catching the 185 bus bound for Bray, departing after 6 p.m. The bus dropped her off at the village of Enniskerry, a familiar stop near her rural home. From there, a 15 to 20-minute walk typically separated her from her doorstep. This journey, though not arduous for a young and active woman like Justine, became fraught with worry when she failed to return home. Terrace, accustomed to Justine's punctuality and communication, grew increasingly anxious as time passed without word from her daughter. Calls and messages went unanswered, prompting Terrace to venture out in search of Justine. She scoured the streets, stopping strangers to inquire about her daughter's distinct Asian features and sporty attire, which stood out in the crowd. Despite sightings of Justine disembarking the bus, her whereabouts remained a mystery. Teresa's frantic search yielded no answers, leaving her with mounting fear and uncertainty about where Justine had gone and what could have befallen her on her seemingly routine journey home. With each passing moment, Teresa's worry deepened, driving her to scour the streets for her daughter and any potential witnesses. Justine's disappearance left her mother in a state of distress, unable to find any trace of her daughter. In desperation, she reached out to the police to report the situation. Detectives promptly took her statement and initiated a search for Justine. At 5:20 p.m., Justine, still wearing her gym clothes, took the 185 bus from Bray to Enniskerry village, arriving at approximately 6 p.m. From there, she had a 15 to 20-minute walk until she reached home. It was a journey she would never have a chance to complete. Despite their humble beginnings, Justine's parents worked tirelessly to support her education and livelihood. Justine's parents worked as a gardener and housekeeper, respectively. Justine herself was known for her reliability, hard work, and dedication to her obligations. Given her strong ties to her family and her commitment to her responsibilities, no one believed she would willingly abandon her loved ones. Furthermore, her limited social circle and absence of typical teenage rebellious behavior made the idea of her running away seem implausible. Despite contacting all of Justine's acquaintances, none could provide insight into her whereabouts. At 24, Justine had outgrown any inclination for teenage defiance, remaining a steadfast and devoted member of her family until her sudden disappearance. Hence, the possibility of Justine running away was swiftly dismissed. She maintained an unwavering connection with her parents, updating them on her every move. On the particular day, she and her mother exchanged a staggering 63 messages, the last being at 6:24 p.m., when Justine alighted from the bus. As detectives diligently investigated leads to determine Justine's whereabouts, a crucial tip emerged from her co-workers. Shortly after Justine's bus stop, authorities were notified of a disturbing incident. A female motorist reported witnessing a man forcibly pushing an Asian woman with dark hair, dressed in sportswear similar to Justine's, into the trunk of a black Nissan Qashqai. The woman recounted her harrowing experience, driving past the suspicious scene with her 12-year-old son and promptly alerting the police. Shortly after, another motorist passed by and witnessed a similarly distressing scene. This time, an Asian girl was seen seated in the back of the vehicle, tapping on the window in evident fear. Initially perplexed, the driver later discussed the incident with his wife. Upon returning home and realizing the gravity of the situation, he promptly contacted the authorities at 7:20 p.m. to report the suspected kidnapping. Another concerned driver also contacted the police, citing a suspicious Nissan vehicle driving erratically approximately 6 kilometers from Enniskerry. Patrol officers swiftly responded to the location provided by the initial female caller. There they discovered Justine's broken cell phone and a bag of bread abandoned on the roadside, raising alarming concerns for her safety. Armed with this disturbing evidence, investigators concluded that the kidnapper had targeted Justine as she made her way home from the bus stop. After initial attempts to conceal her in the trunk were thwarted by Justine's resistance, the suspect forced her into the back seat before driving off to an unknown destination. The suspect's black Nissan was promptly added to the wanted list, prompting an extensive search effort involving patrol cars and helicopters. However, the night made the search more difficult, resulting in no result. When day broke, the search resumed, with detectives revisiting eyewitness testimonies and narrowing down potential suspects. One individual, 40-year-old Mark Hennessy, emerged as a person of interest due to his resemblance to the kidnapper's description. Police officers visited his residence, only to find his wife Nicola unaware of his whereabouts since he left for a drink after work the previous day. This information only raised more suspicions surrounding Mark, prompting investigators to delve further into his background. Mark Hennessy appeared to be a pillar of the community, widely regarded as a devoted family man, husband, and father to 2 young daughters, the youngest born just 8 months prior. Hailing from a respected family, he resided in an affluent neighborhood alongside other young families. Mark's occupation as an estimator on construction sites provided a stable income for his family, and he boasted a clean record with no prior brushes with the law. Despite his seemingly impeccable reputation, law enforcement remained cognizant of the unsettling reality that individuals may conceal darker motives beneath a veneer of respectability. With this in mind, the police officers visited the bar that Mark had frequented the previous night to gather more information. The staff confirmed his presence, but noted that his stay was brief. He had left after consuming a single beer and watching some soccer. Unimpressed by the excitement of the match, Mark's return to the bar around midnight appeared to be marked by visible agitation and unease. Upon reviewing the bar's CCTV footage, investigators corroborated the staff's accounts, observing that Mark's stay was approximately 10 minutes before he departed at around 5:40 p.m. Engrossed in a phone conversation, he quickly made his way to his car and drove off, concluding his visit around 11:30 p.m. Interestingly, upon leaving the bar, Mark actually returned and engaged in a conversation with an acquaintance at the doorway before leaving once again. Detectives found themselves puzzled by Mark's whereabouts between 5:40 p.m. and 11 p.m., and the nature of his activities during this time remained a mystery. By this point, investigators had acquired CCTV footage from the bus route Justine had taken, and upon examination, a disturbing revelation emerged. Mark's black Nissan had trailed the bus just 30 minutes after he left the bar, shadowing its movements throughout the day. This revelation heightened suspicions surrounding his involvement, especially in relation to Justine's disappearance. The search for Mark's car and the missing girl persisted unabated, with growing certainty that the 2 incidents were intertwined. Mark emerged as a prime suspect in Justine's abduction. Despite efforts to track his cell phone, which intermittently powered on and off, Mark managed to evade detection. He made a solitary call to his wife, informing her of his continued absence. Even when confronted by his own family, who pleaded with him to surrender to the authorities, Mark remained obstinate and promptly departed. Mark's parents relayed this encounter to investigators, prompting renewed efforts to locate him. However, Mark remained elusive, staying a step ahead of law enforcement. In a bid for public assistance, the police issued appeals through the media, urging anyone with knowledge of Justine, Mark, or his car's whereabouts to come forward. One listener heeded this call, spotting a similar Nissan Cash car on the road with a familiar-looking driver behind the wheel. Sensing an opportunity, she followed the vehicle to Cherrywood Park, where she observed the driver closely before promptly notifying the authorities. Upon arrival, the responding police officers encountered a man seated behind the wheel, his body covered in blood. Despite their attempts to coax him out of the vehicle, Mark remained obstinate, brandishing a knife in a menacing manner. Faced with imminent danger, the officers were compelled to resort to the use of firearms, resulting in a bullet striking Mark in the shoulder. Removing him from the car, they discovered him conscious, though uncooperative. As they commenced their examination of the vehicle, their hopes of locating the missing girl were dashed, as Justine was nowhere to be found. Persistent questioning yielded no answers from Mark, who maintained a steadfast silence. Medical personnel promptly attended to him, and he was swiftly transported to the hospital, where doctors battled to save his life, clinging to the hope that he might divulge Justine's whereabouts. Tragically, it was revealed that the bullet had tragically ricocheted, fatally striking Mark in the head. Subsequent investigations unearthed the grim truth. The blood adorning his face and body belonged to him, and he bore several fresh stab wounds on his arm and neck. Law enforcement speculated that, Consumed by fear of exposure, Mark had chosen to confront his fate with the knife, conveniently stashed in his vehicle. When the police finally apprehended him, there was a sense of disappointment pervading the air. Despite successfully locating the suspect and his vehicle, their primary objective of finding the missing person remained unfulfilled. However, a note was discovered, its contents obscured by bloodstains. Through the haze of crimson, officers managed to discern the words "sorry" and "Puck's Castle," hinting at a potential lead to Justine's whereabouts. Though hope flickered dimly, they persevered in their search, while the anxious parents fervently prayed for their daughter's safe return. A meticulous search unfolded in a wooded expanse south of Dublin, guided by the cryptic clue near the castle. Initially, Justine's purse containing her identification documents was unearthed. Then, on May 21st, a grim discovery was made: the lifeless body of Justine Valdez. Autopsy revealed the horrific truth that she had been murdered on the very evening of her abduction, succumbing to manual strangulation. Tragically, evidence of sexual assault further compounded the brutality of her demise. However, amidst the sorrow and despair, another unsettling revelation emerged. Toxicological analysis unveiled the presence of prohibited substances in Justine's body. This posed a puzzling enigma, as there was no clear explanation for the origin or purpose of these substances. Conversely, the analysis found that Mark had ingested a significant quantity of these substances, further deepening the mystery surrounding the tragic events. It emerged that Mark had recently spiraled into alcohol and substance abuse, likely contributing to the presence of these substances in Justine's system. Concurrently, his domestic life had deteriorated, with frequent spats between him and his spouse over his substance abuse and mounting debts. Investigations revealed Mark's engagement with the dating app Tinder, where he actively pursued interactions with various women, including flirting with female patrons at bars. Further incriminating evidence emerged when Mark's DNA was found on the victim's body, reinforcing the police's suspicions about his involvement in Justine's abduction and subsequent murder. Detectives pieced together a disturbing narrative. The murder was driven by sexual motives, and Justine became an unwitting victim in Mark's sinister pursuit of prey. Spotting her while following a bus, he seized the opportunity in broad daylight, brazenly abducting her from the street without hesitation, even in the presence of multiple witnesses. A thorough examination of the victim's and perpetrator's phones revealed no prior acquaintance or communication between them. Their paths had never crossed before, with no mutual connections to bridge the gap between victim and assailant. This grim revelation underscored the tragic randomness of Justine's fate and the calculated brutality of Mark's actions. Upon closer scrutiny, the detectives' initial assessment underwent a significant shift. It transpired that Mark was intimately familiar with the route Justine frequently traversed, suggesting a premeditated nature to her murder. Far from a spur-of-the-moment act, Mark had been meticulously observing her movements, biding his time until he deemed it opportune to strike. The day of the abduction marked a deliberate departure from his usual routine, as he purposefully positioned himself at the bus stop, tailing Justine's every move until he pounced on her unsuspecting victim. The revelation sent shockwaves through the local community, unaccustomed to such heinous acts in their otherwise tranquil neighborhood. Many rallied around the grieving family, offering solace and support during their time of immense loss. At the farewell ceremony, poignant tributes were paid as white balloons soared into the sky, symbolizing hope amidst despair. Some attendees donned pink t-shirts emblazoned with Justine's likeness, a touching homage to her memory. Ultimately, Justine's family chose to lay her to rest in her native Philippines, seeking solace in familiar surroundings. Though they initially remained abroad for a period, they eventually returned to Ireland in 2021, seeking a fresh start and new opportunities. Relocating to a different city and pursuing new occupations offered a chance to heal from the harrowing memories that haunted them in their former home. Mark Hennessy exhibited the characteristic behavior of a serial sex offender. They concluded that although his crime seemed spontaneous and unplanned, He displayed the traits of someone who had committed such acts multiple times previously. In the early days of the investigation, it emerged that a man matching Hennessy's age and physical description had been harassing female passengers at train stations in South County Dublin over several years, including exposing himself to them. However, there is no definitive proof that Hennessy and the serial harasser were the same person. We will likely never know, as Mark Hennessy's secrets died with him. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Alison Baden Clay. Alison Baden was born on July 1, 1968 in a Brisbane suburb. Raised in an affluent family, she developed a passion for ballet early on. After school, she pursued higher education, excelling academically and mastering 6 languages. At 25 in 1993, Alison won a local beauty pageant, showcasing her ballet skills. Following university, she secured a position in the HR department at Brisbane's Flight Centre, where her career quickly advanced, recognized by her boss as a bright and promising talent. It was here that Alison met Gerard, who would later become her husband. Gerard Baden Clay was born on September 9, 1970, in Bournemouth, UK. He came from a notable lineage, with his great-grandfather, Robert Baden Powell, being a famed British military leader and founder of the Scouting movement. Gerard was just a year old when his family moved to Zambia, his father Nigel Clay's homeland. After 8 years in Zambia, they immigrated to Australia. Gerard completed his education in Australia and pursued a degree in accounting. He eventually joined the Flight Centre for work, where he met Alison's. It was at the Flight Centre where Gerard encountered Alison, leading to a blossoming relationship. Gerard and Alison Baden Clay exchanged vows on August 23, 1997. Following their nuptials, they embarked on a global tour, including stops in South America, Switzerland, and a stint in London. Once back in Australia, Alison resumed her career at the Flight Centre, eventually rising to a management position. In 2002, she became pregnant and later gave birth to their first child, Hannah. After Hannah's birth, Alison chose to dedicate herself entirely to family life. During this period, Gerard explored various occupations and established a premium real estate agency in Brisbane in 2004, with his parents' involvement in the business. Known for his lively and self-assured demeanor, Gerard dedicated substantial time and effort to his work. The family grew with the birth of their second daughter, Sarah, in 2004, and their youngest, Ella, in 2006. They lived in a verdant home situated in the suburban area of Brookfield, Brisbane. Alison, primarily a homemaker, was deeply engaged in caring for her daughters. Over time, Alison noticed that Gerard was becoming increasingly distant and aloof. This reached a climax when he made the shocking admission that he no longer loved her. Gerard's behavior towards Alison changed, with him frequently criticizing her. He would berate her for making unappealing meals or for not keeping their home clean, sometimes labeling Alison as lazy and expressing that she no longer appealed to him romantically. In the face of these remarks, Alison chose to remain quiet, enduring the harshness of his words. She maintained a personal diary where she documented her enduring love for Gerard, the recurring disputes at home, her own feelings of guilt, and her determination to correct her perceived faults in hopes of rekindling his affection. Despite the turmoil within her family life, Alison managed to mask her inner struggles with an outward appearance of cheerfulness. She was consistently seen as a warm, benevolent individual, a devoted mother, and a loving spouse. In 2011, after the devastating floods in Queensland, Gerard's business faced financial difficulties, accumulating debts of approximately $1 million Australian dollars. That October, Alison discovered that Gerard was engaged in a secret affair with Tony McHugh, a colleague at his agency. Gerard and Tony had first crossed paths in 2008 when she was a client, and later, he hired her. At that time, Tony, a 17-year marriage veteran with children, was experiencing marital troubles. The affair with Gerard quickly escalated, culminating in her divorce. Tony was aware of Gerard's marital status. He had portrayed his relationship with Alison as platonic, claiming their marriage lacked intimacy and that he remained with Allison solely for their daughters. Gerard assured Tony of a future together, including marriage. However, after nearly 4 years, Gerard had still not initiated divorce proceedings when Allison discovered the affair in October 2011. Gerard informed Tony that they had to end their relationship. He terminated the affair, dismissed Tony from his real estate business, and reconciled with his wife without Tony, who held on to the hope of a future together. 4 months later, Tony and Gerard were conversing over the phone while she drove home. They talked about an upcoming real estate conference scheduled for the next day. Unexpectedly, Gerard mentioned that Tony would encounter Allison there. Upset by this foreseen development, Tony questioned Gerard's delay in telling her and accused him of habitual dishonesty in response to her frustration and doubts about their future. Gerard apologized, reaffirmed his love, and reiterated his commitment to divorcing within 3 months. He emphasized his intention to leave Allison, mentioning her mental health struggles. The following morning, on April 20th at 7:14 a.m., a distressed Gerard contacted the police, reporting Allison's disappearance after a walk around 10 p.m. the previous night. Upon arrival at the Bowden Clay home, police observed deep curved scratches on Gerard's face, which he attributed to a shaving accident. During a further examination for photographs, police noticed small red marks on his chest, which Gerard explained as bites from a caterpillar encountered while changing an outdoor light. The house inspection revealed no overt signs of disturbance. It was orderly with the bed neatly made. Gerard was composed, getting his daughters ready for school and daycare. Police interviewed Hannah, Sarah, and Ella, who recalled falling asleep to their mother's lullabies and hadn't seen her since she turned off the light. The girls, tearful during questioning, described their parents as generally happy and good to each other. The police initiated a search in the vicinity and interviewed neighbors for any leads on Allison's whereabouts, but no one reported seeing or hearing anything out of the ordinary. The only clues discovered that day were a small blood stain in Allison's car and a strand of her hair in the trunk. A larger-scale search operation was soon underway, with rescue teams and volunteers scouring the nearby woods, wells, shafts, and dams close to the Bowden Clay residence. A mannequin was placed, dressed similarly to Allison's last known attire, to aid in the search efforts. As time progressed, the likelihood of finding Allison alive diminished. Her friends clung to hope, unwilling to consider the worst. Gerard, visibly distraught, tearfully spoke to the media, yearning for his wife's return. Concurrently, he advised his mistress, Tony, to halt their communication and keep a low profile, promising that they would eventually be together. A decade after Allison vanished, on April 30th, 2012, a boater found a decomposed body by the Colo Creek riverbank, around 8 miles from the Bowden Clay home. The next day, Gerard reached out to the insurance company to discuss claiming his wife's life insurance, valued at $800,000 Australian dollars. Shortly after, the body discovered under the bridge was confirmed as the 43-year-old Allison Bowden Clay by a medical examiner. The advanced decomposition made determining the exact cause of death challenging. Dental records confirmed Allison's identity, and she was dressed in the same outfit as when she disappeared. Forensic indications pointed to possible strangulation, leading to the classification of her death as a homicide. On May 11, 2012, St. Paul's Church hosted Allison Bowden Clay's funeral. Gerard, visibly distraught, shed tears throughout the service, consoling his daughters and extending solace to Allison's parents. The ceremony saw a large turnout with hundreds in attendance. Concurrently, Gerard maintained discreet contact with his mistress, Tony, using public phones for communication. He apprised her of the tragic circumstances surrounding his wife's death and implored Tony to keep their clandestine relationship hidden from police inquiries. Gerard maintained his claim that Allison had gone for a walk around 10 p.m. and was gone by the time he woke up. However, contradictory evidence emerged. Detectives found that Gerard had charged his phone at 2 a.m. and was on his computer at 5 a.m., searching for information about the right to remain silent. Forensic analysis contradicted his claim of shaving cuts, suggesting the marks on his cheek resembled fingernail scratches. Additionally, no blood was detected on his razor. A biologist challenged Gerard's explanation of caterpillar bites on his chest, noting the absence of such caterpillars in the family's area that could have caused such marks. A botanical specialist concluded that the marks were not consistent with caterpillar bites. When Allison's body was discovered, her hair contained 5 distinct leaf types: eucalyptus, Chinese elm, crepe myrtle, cat's claw vine, and fishbone fern. Notably, 2 of these varieties, eucalyptus and Chinese elm, grew directly under the bridge where her body was found. Significantly, all 5 types of leaves and thorns were present in the backyard of the Baden-Clay family residence a month after Allison's funeral on June 13, 2012. 41-year-old Gerard Baden-Clay was arrested and charged with his wife's murder. Asserting his innocence, he vowed to fight the charges and sought bail, which was promptly denied due to concerns he might flee during questioning. Investigators contacted Tony, who disclosed the truth about their 4-year clandestine relationship. Notably, just days before Allison's disappearance, Gerard had sent Tony a letter promising that he would be with her by July 1st. The prosecution alleged that Gerard Baden-Clay murdered Allison to claim an insurance payout, clear his debts, and start anew with Tony McHugh. They theorized that on the night of April 19, 2012, after putting their daughters to bed, Allison joined Gerard to watch TV. An intense argument is believed to have erupted, during which Allison scratched Gerard's cheek. DNA traces were found under Allison's nails, but their origin was undetermined due to degradation. The prosecution suggested that Gerard strangled Allison, dragged her body through the backyard, entangling her hair with leaves, then transported her in her car's trunk to the river, disposing of her body under a bridge. They believed Gerard expected the river to wash the body away, concealing his crime. He reportedly returned home, charged his phone, cleaned the house, and reported Allison missing the next morning. After the discovery of the body, he sought legal counsel for criminal defense and visited the lawyer's office. At the June 2014 murder trial of Allison Baden-Clay, the prosecution adamantly argued for Gerard's guilt. Gerard, however, steadfastly denied any involvement. In court, he admitted to a dispute with Allison, suggesting she might have left home late at night and, in her depressive state, possibly chosen to end her life. This theory was staunchly rejected by Allison's family and friends, who were convinced of her unwavering commitment to her daughters, believing she would never abandon them. Her friends voiced long-standing disapproval of Gerard, describing him as arrogant, disingenuous, and conceited, and believed Allison's deep love for him blinded her to these negative traits. At the trial, excerpts from Allison Baden-Clay's diary were presented, revealing her sense of isolation and control by Gerard, especially after their first child's birth. She felt lonely, confined to the home, and detailed Gerard's controlling behavior, including insulting her, tracking her conversations through a baby monitor, managing her finances, erasing relatives' contacts from her phone, and blocking their calls. Following Allison's demise, Gerard's attempt to claim the insurance payout was rejected, with the funds being withheld pending the trial's conclusion. Another key testimony came from Melissa Romano, who had never met Gerard in person, but spoke with him on the phone in 2009 regarding a real estate deal. She testified that after finalizing the deal, Gerard made a startling call to her, proposing, "I'm looking for someone to kill my wife." Romano, taken aback, questioned his motive, but Gerard abruptly shifted the conversation and ended the call, leaving the statement unresolved. Gerard Baden-Clay was convicted on July 15, 2014, and sentenced to life in prison, eligible for parole after 15 years. In 2015, he challenged his sentence, leading to a court ruling that the murder was unintentional and thus reducing his prison term. This verdict, however, triggered a massive public outcry, culminating in protests with about 4,000 participants standing in solidarity with Allison's family. Responding to the public sentiment, in 2016, the High Court of Australia overturned the appellate court's decision, reinstating the original murder conviction. Consequently, Gerard Baden-Clay's parole eligibility has been deferred until at least 2027, while incarcerated. Initially, Gerard conducted himself as an exemplary inmate, but as time progressed, he adapted to prison life and became less restrained in his behavior, leading to an incident where he inappropriately touched a prison guard, resulting in a stern reprimand during his imprisonment. Gerard Baden-Clay also established a friendship with a 73-year-old businessman and millionaire, John Chardin, who was imprisoned for the manslaughter of his wife. Additionally, he developed a rapport with Mayan Carouse, a convict serving time for the triple homicide of his girlfriend and her 2 siblings. Following the trial of Gerard Baden-Clay, his former mistress, Toni McHugh, moved to Bali, where she engaged in teaching and charity work. 4 years later, she relocated to the United Arab Emirates to continue her career in education. McHugh now leads a modest lifestyle and keeps her personal details under wraps. She occasionally connects with friends via social media using an anonymous account, cautious of Baden-Clay potentially locating her post-release. In her most recent media interaction, McHugh expressed remorse about the situation and clarified that she never intended harm to Allison. She also disclosed that Baden-Clay and Clay had been unfaithful to Allison with not only her but other women as well, including Hannah, Sarah, and Ella, the daughters of Gerard and Allison Baden-Clay. The children, Hannah, Sarah, and Ella, are being cared for by their maternal grandparents, Allison's parents. The entirety of Allison's estate, including any insurance money, was entrusted to her children in 2022. The eldest daughter, Hannah Baden-Clay, has completed her university education and has pursued a career in dancing, following in her mother's footsteps to honor Allison's memory. To address the critical issue of domestic violence, Allison's sister, Vanessa, founded a charitable organization dedicated to combating domestic abuse, raising awareness, and providing support to those impacted by such situations. Through this case, being able to recognize the signs of domestic and family violence is a crucial first step towards prevention. In Allison's case, there were numerous indicators, some more conspicuous than others. These signs included, but were not limited to, a sense of isolation from friends, family, and support systems, a significant degree of control over financial resources, and a gradual erosion of self-confidence and self-worth. Identifying these things early on is essential in order to address the underlying issues and provide the necessary support and resources to those affected by domestic and family violence. By being vigilant and attuned to the subtle and overt manifestations of this complex issue, we can take proactive measures to foster safer and more supportive environments for individuals and families. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Susan Reinert. Susan Gallagher Reinert was born in 1943 in the charming town of Ridgeway, located in northwestern Pennsylvania. Her parents were William and Jane Gallagher, with her father working as a newspaper business manager and her mother being a dedicated school teacher. These early influences played a significant role in shaping Susan's path. From a young age, it was evident that she was destined to follow in her mother's footsteps, displaying a passion for learning and an innate love for literature. Her educational journey commenced at Grove City College, where she crossed paths with a young Air Force man named Kenneth Reinhard. This chance encounter would go on to change the trajectory of her life. Susan and Kenneth fell in love during their undergraduate studies. Susan's hard work and commitment paid off when she graduated with a bachelor's degree. But she didn't stop there. She went on to earn a master's degree in English from Pennsylvania State University in 1966. In 1965, shortly after graduating from Grove City College, Susan and Kenneth got married and started a new chapter of their lives. As a military couple, they were stationed in various places across the country, first moving to the West Coast and living in Sacramento, California, before returning to the Northeast and settling in Rome, New York. They even spent some time in Puerto Rico before eventually finding their permanent home in the Philadelphia region in 1971. In 1974, Susan Reinhard, a dedicated teacher and loving mother, faced an unexpected twist in her life when she and Kenneth decided to separate. Despite the divorce, it was a peaceful parting, closing a chapter in their lives without legal disputes. Susan, a vibrant single mother, focused on creating a warm home for her two kids, Karen and Michael. Known for her warm and friendly nature, Susan was beloved by colleagues and students at Chestnut-Walled Elementary School. Outside of her professional life, Susan dedicated time to Parents Without Partners. Following her mother's death, Susan, emotionally weighed down, found strength in her connection with the organization. Despite the challenges, she remained resilient, leaning on Parents Without Partners for support as she navigated loss and change. Her story took a mysterious turn in the months leading up to her disappearance. Her mother's death and a substantial inheritance added complexity to her life. Yet Susan's strength and resilience, along with her support network, hinted at a resilient spirit facing the unknown. On Friday, June 22, 1979, Susan Reinhardt and her two children embarked on what would be their last day together. Earlier that day, Michael, Susan's son, spent time with his father, Kenneth, who worked as a senior personnel officer for Fidelity Bank in the neighboring suburb near Philadelphia. That evening, they shared a special moment by participating in a father-son softball game. However, the game was cut short when Susan arrived to pick up Michael at approximately 8:30 p.m. Michael made a call to Kenneth at home, apologizing for their early departure from the game. Later that evening, Susan reached out to her former in-laws, Florence and John Reinhardt, with whom she maintained a warm relationship even after her divorce. With close to a full tank, Susan ensured she had enough fuel for the trip to Allentown, Pennsylvania, a town located about an hour north. Her plan was to attend a Parents Without Partners conference and use it as a weekend getaway for her and the kids. Susan had signed up to moderate a workshop and registered her two children for events that weekend. They intended to leave on Saturday morning and return later in the weekend. That Friday evening, around 9 p.m., 11-year-old Karen and 10-year-old Michael were outside collecting hailstones left behind by a summer storm. Approximately half an hour later, neighbors heard the distinct sound of Susan's orange-red Plymouth Horizon starting up. A few minutes later, the hatchback was no longer in Susan's driveway. Susan had left home with her two children, presumably heading to visit her boyfriend that evening before heading to the conference. Susan had a long-standing affair with William Bradfield, also a teacher, and despite the secrecy, it strained her marriage with Kenneth. Rumors spread that Susan and William might marry. On June 22, 1979, Susan set off on a trip with her children after visiting her boyfriend. Their planned destination was Allentown, approximately 49 miles to the north, where they intended to spend the night in a motel. However, the expected trip never took place. Instead, Susan and her two children vanished without a trace. 2 days passed without any sign of Susan Reinhardt and her two children. The days of uncertainty and worry were taking their toll on those who knew and loved them. Then on June 25, 1979, the orange Plymouth hatchback that Susan had been driving was discovered in the parking lot of the Houston Hotel in Harrisburg. This was 87 miles from Allentown and 97 miles from her home. Tragically, Susan Reinhardt's lifeless body was discovered in the back of her vehicle. The details of her tragic demise were gruesome. Her nude, battered body was bound in chains and curled up in the wheel well of her car. Her hands were bound, and she had two black eyes. It was evident that she had either been beaten with chains or bound so tightly that the chains had left bruises on her back. Even more horrifying, she had been administered a lethal dose of morphine. However, the whereabouts of her two children remained unknown, as they had seemingly vanished without a trace. The police searched for hours, hoping the children were with a babysitter. However, none of Susan's regular sitters, friends, or family had seen them that weekend. So, the police began looking for answers. First, the police plastered pictures of the Reinhardt family across newspapers for weeks, hoping to find any leads on the two missing children. This was before the internet and Amber Alerts were available. As the investigation continued, it was revealed that Susan Reinhardt had named William Bradfield, the the man she believed she would marry, as the beneficiary of life insurance policies worth a substantial $730,000. This raised suspicions that the children might have been killed to clear the way for this financial windfall. However, William Bradfield had a solid alibi, as he was at the beach in Cape May, New Jersey, during the weekend when Susan was killed and her children disappeared. Several other teachers were with him and could vouch for his whereabouts. The police shifted their focus to Upper Marin High School, where Susan worked. The school was already dealing with its share of turmoil. The principal, Jay, was involved in a scandal. He had been the principal until the previous year, when he was relieved of his post. Jay was fired after he was arrested at a local shopping center, where a search of his Ford Granada revealed loaded handguns, a hooded mask, and various tools associated with burglary. Equally unsettling, a syringe filled with morphine was found in his trunk. Even before this, Jay's life was falling apart. His wife, Stephanie, was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer, and she would ultimately succumb to it in August of 1979. The following years saw her in and out of hospitals during this time. She began keeping a diary, in which she made note of her husband's bizarre behavior, which began to truly escalate during this period. He began to participate in group intimacy and swinging groups, which she herself was not too keen on, and this seemed to precede even more alarming behavior. In September of 1977, the couple's adult daughter, also named Stephanie, decided to return home to live with her parents. Stephanie brought her husband, Edward Hunsberger, with her, and the two moved into the Jays' home in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. Stephanie was in the middle of a battle with cancer, so the family was in the midst of uncertainty, and it seemed like tensions were between all of them. Edward and Stephanie Hunsberger, Jay's daughter and son-in-law respectively, were no saints. Both had been battling heroin addiction for some time and had struggled to find and keep employment in the years preceding their move. Then, moving back home with Stephanie's parents was an act of desperation and a way for them to stay away from drugs. In the early months of 1978, just a few months after moving in with Jay Smith and his ailing wife, their daughter Stephanie and son-in-law Edward mysteriously went missing. The last known sighting of Stephanie and Edward was in February 1978, when they visited Edward's parents in North Wales, Pennsylvania. Upon leaving, they mentioned they would return for another visit soon, but they never showed up again. Edward also failed to meet with his probation officer as scheduled. Later that month, authorities would begin to reach out to their last known contact, Jay Smith, who would tell anyone interested in hearing his side of the story that Edward and Stephanie had left for California. According to him, the two had owed money to some drug dealers in the region and had fled to the West Coast, but he couldn't provide any more information than that. Edward and Stephanie had been living as nomads, so no one noticed their disappearance. Meanwhile, Jay was arrested for theft, and a search of his house revealed alarming findings alongside firearms. Authorities found marijuana, prescription pills, security guard uniforms, badges, and disturbing pornography. They also discovered nitric acid and stolen office equipment from a local school. Jay was connected to recent armed robberies matching his description and attire. While awaiting sentencing for theft, Jay's alibi witness, William, testified that they were on vacation during the robberies. However, the jury didn't buy it. Jay had an unsettling reputation at Upper Marin, earning the nickname the Prince of Darkness. Susan's autopsy indicated death from strangulation or suffocation, with a wide time frame for her demise. Investigators questioned Jay about his whereabouts during that period, but he couldn't provide a coherent answer. An official stated that there was enough morphine in her system to kill her 10 times over, strongly indicating an intentional overdose. Jay was eventually found guilty of a series of store robberies that occurred during the late 1970s, and, on June 25, 1979, he was sentenced to 2 to 5 years in prison, just as the investigation was intensifying. But that wasn't all. Even though Jay was imprisoned for his burglary charges, the police still saw him as the main suspect and began investigating his background further. Only then did they discover that Jay's daughter and husband had gone missing in a similar manner as Susan and her 2 children. The police suspected that there could be connections between the disappearance of the couple, Susan's death, and the disappearance of her children. Firstly, Susan was killed by a morphine overdose, and a large quantity of morphine was found in Jay's house a few months earlier. Secondly, a plastic comb with Jay's military unit insignia was discovered in Susan's car. The disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law bore a striking resemblance to the disappearance of Susan's children. The events that took place during this crime were truly shocking and left a lasting impact on the public, but the real shocker was yet to come. In the last weeks of July 1979, approximately a month after the discovery of Susan's body near Harrisburg, investigators stumbled upon a potential motive for this tragic crime: financial gain. On July 20th, 1979, a lawyer from Philadelphia filed a caveat in both Montgomery and Delaware counties on behalf of Susan's ex-husband, Kenneth Reinhardt, and her brother, Patrick Reinhardt. This legal maneuver was intended to temporarily halt the processing of any will that Susan might have left behind in either county. The purpose was to allow these 2 parties, Susan's ex-husband and her brother, the opportunity to review the will. They chose to file this in both counties because Susan's residence in Ardmore, Pennsylvania, was situated near the county border, making it feasible for her to have filed a will in either location. The following week, it was revealed that just a few weeks before her tragic death, Susan had made significant changes to her will. She'd also acquired several expensive life insurance policies, designating her boyfriend at the time as the beneficiary. In her legal documents, she referred to him as her future husband. As the police delved deeper into the case, they learned that Susan's death occurred sometime between midnight on Saturday, June 23, 1979, and midnight on Sunday, June 24th. William and the other teachers arrived in Cape Cod at 5 a.m. on Saturday, where they stayed until the afternoon of Monday, June 25th. However, William's exact whereabouts during the time of Susan's disappearance remained unclear, suggesting a potential gap in his alibi. It also revealed that Susan had been withdrawing substantial sums of cash from her accounts, totaling approximately $25,000, which she did through several deposits due to daily withdrawal limits. She informed bank employees that she intended to invest the funds in multiple high-yielding investments managed by her boyfriend, William Bradfield, whom she referred to as her future husband. What Susan didn't know was that she was just one of several women in William's life. He was dating multiple people, including one of their fellow English teachers, with whom he had maintained a secret relationship for nearly a decade. Allegedly, William had promised to handle these financial transactions and assured her that the investments would yield substantial returns to fund their upcoming marriage and relocation to England. When investigators looked into the case, they discovered fake stocks and bonds inside Susan's home, which initially puzzled them. However, it later became clear that William had given these fraudulent securities to Susan, having forged and sold them to her. These bogus securities were linked to mostly non-existent companies and held little value, pointing to a long-running deception by Susan's lover. This revelation added a new dimension to the story, intensifying the existing financial motive. In March 1980, William was called to testify in a civil suit, but during his initial appearance, he refused to answer questions, deferring inquiries to his legal counsel. His lawyers, on the other hand, denied that he had taken Susan's money, but were open to negotiating a settlement with the state to resolve the matter and process Susan's will, which stood to be $7 million. In June of 1980, William testified for the first time as part of the civil trial. He downplayed almost every connection he had to the case. William claimed his relationship with Susan was not as serious as she had told her friends and family. He also testified that he and Susan had not been planning to get married later that year, despite Susan telling numerous confidants otherwise. Furthermore, William implied that Susan had engaged in a secret affair with Jay Smith, the former principal of Upper Marion High School, but this was not supported by any evidence. Many friends and family members recalled Susan being in a long-term relationship with William, but they did not mention a relationship with Jay Smith, who was in the state prison during the trial. William refused to explain why Susan had named him the beneficiary of an estate worth more than $1 million. He portrayed Susan as an unreliable person, always in trouble, and blamed her for her own problems, stating he was just helping to clean up her messes. As the civil suit into the missing $25,000 progressed, Susan's brother and ex-husband filed a separate lawsuit in June 1980, aiming to recover the full amount of an insurance policy taken out on Susan's life just weeks before her death, around $450,000, and move the funds into a trust for a private investigation. The case took several unexpected turns, and the twists kept coming. On February 20th, 1981, police arrested William on 2 counts of theft and 1 count of conspiracy, alleging that he had kept the $25,000 Susan had given him, ostensibly for investment. A former student of William's, Wendy Ziegler, was also charged as a co-conspirator. William was released on bail on February 23, 1981, but the criminal trial was set for the following month. Before the criminal trial began, the original civil suit came to a resolution. It was announced that $36,000 would be allocated from Susan's estate to pay for further investigations into the whereabouts of the children and contest the rest of Susan's will, preventing William from receiving any funds. On August 3, 1981, William's 5-day trial ended with a guilty verdict for theft. Delaware County Prosecutor Edward Weiss requested an increase in William's bond from $25,000 to $75,000, as they believed the conviction increased the flight risk, particularly given the looming possibility of murder charges. This request was granted by Judge Robert A. Wright. On April 6, 1983, William was taken into custody by Pennsylvania state troopers and charged with 3 counts of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, and obstructing the administration of the law. The grand jury's findings pointed to William's awareness of the plot to kill Susan and her children and his alleged complicity in these crimes. However, J.J., who was believed to be involved, wasn't charged at that time. The indictment relied partially on a confession from an inmate named Proctor Noel, who claimed that William had confessed to his involvement in the murders during a chess match in prison. The arrest of William Bradfield in April 1983 marked a turning point in the case. While there was no direct evidence linking William to the murder of Susan Reinhardt or the disappearance of her 2 children, prosecutors were confident in their case. William's prior theft conviction added context, and the connection to persons unknown, believed to be responsible for disposing of the bodies, further implicated him. In the 1980s, Jay Smith, who was serving time for unrelated convictions, was unable to avoid testifying before a grand jury, despite asserting his Fifth Amendment right. William Bradfield was called to testify in 1984, but the details of his testimony remained undisclosed. This round of questioning was believed to be related to Jay Smith's missing daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie and Edward Hunsberger. In April 1985, Jay was asked to provide handwriting samples, likely related to documents written years before that may have detailed a plan to murder Susan Reinhardt. This eventually led to Jay's arrest on June 25, 1985, exactly 6 years after Susan Reinhardt's body was found. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and taken into custody while awaiting trial. Joseph Wall, a noted crime author, released a book about the case in 1984, favoring the theory that J.J. was the actual killer. A TV miniseries adaptation followed, further exposing the case to a national audience. J.J. continued to maintain his innocence from prison, attempting appeals and alleging that he'd been framed by William Bradfield. It wasn't until 1989 that the court decided to revisit his case and discovered issues with the prosecution, leading to a new trial in 1990. Jay waived his right to a speedy trial to allow for a full investigation. By 1992, The Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled in Jay's favor, vacating his murder conviction and finding issues with the prosecution's conduct. Over the next 2 decades, the state did not retry the case, allowing JSJ to live the rest of his life as a free man. William Bradfield continued to evade court rulings, refusing to repay the $25,000 he owed to Susan Reinhardt's estate. The lawsuit was finally settled in 1996. Jay filed lawsuits against the state and Joseph Wall, alleging defamation and conspiracy, but both lawsuits were ultimately dismissed. On January 16, 1998, William Bradfield, who had been incarcerated for over a decade, was found unresponsive in his cell and pronounced dead of cardiac arrest. Kenneth Reinhard, Susan Reiner's ex-husband, passed away in June 2002 without knowing the fate of his 2 missing children. J.J., whose sentence was vacated in 1992, went on to write books about the case and remarried in 2002. He died on May 12, 2009, with his involvement in the story and the 1978 disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie and Edward Huntsberger, still unresolved. To this day, these cases remain unsolved. The Reinhard murders is a story that continues to shock people with its many twists and disturbing revelations. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Catherine Wells Burr. On the morning of September 12, 2012, a local resident named Orlando was hurrying home after a lengthy night shift at a gas station. He had promised his wife that he would take their young daughter Maria to daycare. Loud music played in the car to keep him awake as the trees along the road swiftly passed by one after another. As he emerged from a sharp turn, he saw black smoke. Orlando slowed down. Smoke was billowing from a nearby parking lot where a car was engulfed in flames. Orlando stopped, ran to take a closer look, but couldn't get close because of the fire. 4 minutes later, when the firefighters arrived at the scene, the car was completely burnt out. The arriving police cordoned off the area with safety tape to keep the gathering onlookers at a distance. The place was quite deserted so early in the morning, and there were no witnesses nearby who could describe the incident's exact moment. Upon examining the scene, a charred body was discovered. The police had to identify the victim and determine the causes of this tragic death. There were no signs of a car accident or skid marks found nearby. Similarly, no tire tread marks from another vehicle were found. The police's initial theory was that the death was caused by a car self-ignition or spontaneous combustion due to malfunctions. A lengthy investigation and multiple expert analyses were ahead. The remains were transported to the forensic laboratory to determine the identity and cause of death of the deceased. Fragments of the burned vehicle were also delivered to the forensic laboratory to identify any malfunctions and establish the cause of the fire. The police began their investigation by checking the missing persons database and recent reports of disappearances. Forensic experts quickly identified the deceased. She was a 23-year-old local resident, Catherine Wells Burr. On the same day, a report of a missing person was filed by Rafal Novak concerning the disappearance of her. According to Rafal Novak's report, he left for work at 5:30 a.m., while his girlfriend Catherine was still sleeping soundly at home. Although they worked for the same company, his shift started 2 hours earlier. When Catherine did not show up for work after this time and Rafal could not find her at any of places, he contacted the police. The investigation began. The police interviewed the victim's parents and sister, as well as Rafal Novak, who reported her missing, and all her colleagues and friends. Gradually, by piecing together information about the last days and subsequently the years of the young woman's life, they managed to reconstruct a sequence of events that led to her tragic demise. Catherine Wells Burr was born in 1989. Her father and mom, Phil and Jane Wells Burr, in the United Kingdom. She was the second child in her family, with an older sister named Lynn. During the summer of 2010, while on a university break, Catherine met one of the employees, 31-year-old Rafal Novak, on a new vacuum cleaner production line. The tall, ruggedly handsome blonde quickly caught Catherine's eye. He was an immigrant from Poland with a former wife and son back home. About 4 years prior, he had moved to England in search of a better life. Catherine and Rafal soon started dating. Initially, they met for lunch at the cafe on the production site, but these lunches quickly turned into romantic dinners. Rafal courted Catherine beautifully, gifting her lovely bouquets, taking her to movies, and going for walks. Rafal opened up to Catherine, sharing his past life and reasons for moving to the UK. Catherine's trusting heart let the blonde man in completely. Their relationship progressed so swiftly that within a few months, Catherine introduced Rafal to her parents. They joyfully welcomed their daughter's choice into the family, hopeful for the couple's future happiness. Soon, the lovers were planning their wedding. In 2011, Catherine graduated with honors from Bath Spa University and landed a promising job as a business analyst at Pneumatic International, the company that manufactures Henry vacuum cleaners. She quickly advanced in her career, providing good job opportunities for her parents and sister. Catherine was intelligent and well-educated. She always knew how to approach people, was concerned with her colleagues' problems, and was very attentive to those around her. Her kind gaze and radiant smile endeared her to people who held the young leader in high regard. Catherine Wells Burr's career was on a fast track to success. Her substantial earnings, combined with those of her partner Rafal Novak, allowed them to purchase a spacious home with a terrace in Willow Way. Despite their financial well-being, the house was bought on a mortgage, for which the young couple secured insurance coverage as per their agreement with the bank. Youth, successful careers, and love. It seemed they had everything needed for happiness. Yet, the fateful day of September 12, 2012, marked a dividing line in their lives, changing everything from before to after. The investigation pressed on, uncovering new and unfamiliar facts about the lives of Catherine and Rafal. Over time, the veil of deceit that had enveloped their relationship from the start began to lift. 29-year-old Rafal Novak left behind a wife and child in Poland, fleeing to escape significant debts. He relocated to the UK, where he met Anna Lagwinowicz. Since 2008, they maintained a close relationship, then Catherine came into the picture for a while. Rafal saw both women, but ultimately he chose Catherine Wells Burr, seeing her as a more viable option for a family and financial stability. While Catherine genuinely dreamed of a happy marriage with the man she loved and starting a family, Novak was plotting a scheme to end her life, intending to leave himself and his mistress, Anna Lagwinowicz, with the life insurance payout and the large house, a significant portion of the funds for which had been contributed by Catherine. The plot of this crime was meticulously planned and executed with even greater cruelty and cold-bloodedness. On the day of her disappearance, after waiting a few hours, Rafal approached Catherine's boss to inquire about her whereabouts, feigning sincere panic and despair in front of Catherine's colleagues and relatives. Catherine was not found at her parents' home, nor at her own, and her car was missing as well. Rafal recalled that she had been receiving threatening letters from a certain mentally unstable admirer for some time. Following this, her family contacted the police. The family was in the living room of the young couple's house, awaiting her return, when they were informed that a burning car with a body inside had been found. Rafal mentioned that the evening before her disappearance was entirely normal. The couple had gone for a walk after work, stopped by a store for groceries, had dinner, and then went to bed together after watching some television. Catherine did not appear scared or disturbed. However, a more detailed investigation proved that her death occurred earlier. Catherine was strangled around 2 a.m., likely in her own bed while she was sleeping. Her lifeless body was then placed in the car, taken a short distance from the house, and callously set on fire in an attempt to destroy evidence. Yet Rafal Novak had a solid alibi. He was at work from 5:30 a.m., and according to him, Catherine was asleep in bed when he left. The burning car was discovered between 6 and 7 a.m. However, Rafal was still at home at 1:30 a.m., significantly altering the case's direction. Thus, Rafal Novak became the prime suspect in the murder of Catherine Wells Burr. Evidence allowed for Novak to be detained pending further investigation. Rafal claimed that Catherine was being pursued by a stalker who had repeatedly written to her and driven her to hysteria. During the investigation, it was revealed that Catherine indeed had accounts on several adult websites, indicating a hidden side of her life unknown to her close ones. Intimate photos and flirtatious exchanges with men were found, along with a letter from a secret admirer. However, no matter how long you try to twist the truth, it always comes to light. In an attempt to mislead the investigation and direct it towards a false trail, Rafal forgot to destroy the evidence proving his direct involvement in Catherine's demise. Importantly, this provided the prosecution with a motive. Upon examining Novak's phone, investigators discovered that he never ceased communication and meetings with Anna Logvinovich. They actively met over the last few months, and it was also found that the man had a financial interest. Shortly before Catherine's demise, they both insured their lives for a sum of £123,000, with Catherine and Rafal being the sole beneficiaries of the insurance contracts and recipients of the payouts. The receipt of a substantial life insurance sum emerged as the primary motive in the case regarding Catherine's demise and the arson of her car to confuse the investigation. Police discovered that on the day of Catherine's disappearance, she sent a message to Anna Logwinowicz's phone. Surveillance cameras also revealed that a few days before the crime, Anna and her uncle filled a full canister of gasoline at a gas station, suggesting their potential involvement in the case. 32-year-old Anna Lagwinowicz and her 38-year-old uncle, Tadeusz Dmitryshin, became suspects in the complicity of intentional crime and arson to conceal evidence. The crime was meticulously planned over several months by the trio. They prepared thoroughly for the act, creating accounts on pornographic websites, uploading photoshopped images of Catherine, and fabricating and saving exchanges with various men to lead the investigation astray with a false trail. When Rafal and Anna realized it was futile to deny the irrefutable evidence, they started blaming each other. The conspirators wove a web of deceitful lies around an honest and cheerful young woman. They created fake online profiles for her on websites used by people seeking casual sexual encounters, and went to great lengths to conceal their crime, not only setting her body on fire, but also fabricating a completely fictitious backstory for her. They intended to depict Catherine as a promiscuous woman with many secrets and desires. One of the conspirators sent a text message from Catherine's phone at 5:17 a.m. on the day of her death to a fictional person, suggesting she was headed to meet him. However, forensic experts determined that when the fire started in the car, Catherine was wearing only her favorite nightgown, not the outfit she would have chosen for a meeting with a man. The police also discovered that a pillow was missing from her bed, and the only pillowcase had been washed and was hanging on a clothesline, leading them to believe she was suffocated in Anna Logwinowicz's car. Detectives found a SIM card linked to the number Catherine was supposed to have texted that morning in Anna's apartment trash bin, and they also found notes she had written seeking inspiration for messages supposedly sent by the mysterious person. As soon as Novak and Lainovich realized the game was up, they both claimed that Catherine's demise was the act of a hired criminal. A week before the trial began, Anna asked a fellow inmate to secretly pass on a fake confession from an imaginary hitman who claimed Novak paid him £20,000 sterling to end Catherine's life. The story penned by Lainovich might have offered a chilling insight into what happened to their victim, according to this fictional hitman. Rafal Novak played the role of a loving boyfriend perfectly in the days leading up to Catherine's demise, holding hands and kissing her in front of family members. He even told her mother, Jane, that he had lost his world and his future. Rafal Novak refused to acknowledge his involvement in the young woman's death and went further, telling her mother, Jane Wells Burr, that her daughter was receiving emails and text messages from an ex-boyfriend who said if he couldn't have her, no one could, to complete the narrative. He even claimed she spoke of taking her own life. Worse still, Novak let the distraught Wells family parents comfort him, who believed he was also mourning the young woman he loved. Rafal's acting was so convincing that Catherine's mother, Jane, hugged him after her death and allowed him to call her Mom. She said that after the police told her in the early days of the investigation that he was seen more as a witness than a suspect, she decided to offer him all the support possible. I thought if Catherine loved him that much and he was part of our family, then he deserved to come back. The lengthy trial commenced under the chairmanship of Justice Sharp. The jury heard during the trial that the three defendants hoped to receive a life insurance payout of £123,000 sterling and half ownership of a two-bedroom home in Mangold, Somerset, valued at £137,000 sterling, following Catherine Wells Burr's death. The court was told that Rafal Novak showed no emotion when police discovered the woman's body in her burned car on the morning of September 12th. Anna Lagwinovich, who often shook her head and laughed on the defendant's bench when Novak suggested she was responsible for the crime, refused to take the witness stand. Dmitry Sheen also did not testify in his defense during the trial. Judge told the defendants that the murder was a terrible, merciless crime, cold-bloodedly committed with a gross breach of trust. None of the three showed any emotion during the sentencing. Judge Justice Sharp sentenced the three Polish nationals to mandatory life sentences with a minimum of 32 years in prison without the possibility of early release. The judge expressed heartfelt sympathy for Catherine's parents. They could never have known that behind the facade presented to them by Rafal Novak was a person devoid of remorse and decency. It was all about the money. Novak and Catherine had no ties binding them. They were not married, nor did they have children. The crime against Catherine was motivated by money, selfishness, and greed. While in the case of Anna Lagwinovich, it stemmed from jealousy and a desire for revenge. At the request of the parents, Judge Justice Sharp read statements from Catherine's mother and sister. Her mother wept in the courtroom as her statement was read, which said Catherine was a caring, loving, sincere, generous, loyal, thoughtful, exceptional, and amazing. She had a bright and promising future with so much potential. Her parents, Phil and I, were immensely proud of the young woman she had become. The manner of Catherine's passing, a cruel and calculated act of villainy, and the hatred shown to her, will haunt us for the rest of our lives. Now, she considers Rafal Novak an evil person who should spend the rest of his life behind bars. Catherine's father, Philip, added that they took him into their home, and he became like a son, but he betrayed them all during the trial. Rafal Novak, covered in tattoos, wept in the witness box, insisting he had no part in the demise of his true love. A father of one, who has a wife and a teenage son back in Poland, told the jurors that everyone is blaming him for something he never did. The court heard that Novak showed no emotion when the police discovered Catherine Wells Burr's body in her burned car. Her mother, Jane Wells Burr, told the jurors that he didn't even mention Catherine, instead asking for a steak dinner after his initial release from police custody. Mrs. Wells Burr said that as soon as they bought a house together and took out a life insurance policy, her daughter's fate was sealed. She told the police that her life had a bounty on it, and indeed, she had signed her own death warrant the moment she signed the mortgage. Thus, 31-year-old Rafal Novak, a factory worker, was found guilty of the crime against his girlfriend, having suffocated her with a pillow while she slept. Afterward, he orchestrated a conspiracy with his secret lover, 32-year-old Anna Lagwinovich, and her uncle, 38-year-old Tadeusz Dmytryshin, to claim a life insurance payout of £123,000 and a share in the house. It is believed that they also lived in Taunton, took Wells Burr's body in her Ford Focus to a remote location 7 miles from the city, and set the car on fire at 6 a.m., by which time Novak was already at work, providing him with a solid alibi. The jurors of the Royal Court of Bristol found Rafal Novak, Anna Lagwinovich, and Tadeusz Dmytryshin Shine, all originally from Poland, guilty of the crime. The crime was the culmination of months of secret meetings and phone calls between Rafal Novak and his Polish lover, Anna Lagwinovich, with Catherine completely unaware of her role in what turned out to be a love triangle. The accused spent months leading detectives on a false trail. creating fake profiles for the girl on adult websites, and sending her messages from a supposed mysterious lover. Following the verdict, the parents of the young woman who lost her life, Catherine Wells Burr, called for stricter immigration controls. Philip and Jane Wells Burr, who have separated after the tragic loss of their daughter, stated that Rafał Nowak, convicted of assaulting his wife in Poland, would not have been allowed entry into the UK if the immigration rules were as stringent as those in the United States of America. They blamed the European Union and stated that the UK needs to tighten its entry measures for foreign nationals. Family members of Catherine Wells Burr wept in court as the sentence was announced. The three perpetrators showed no emotion. The criminal trio received life sentences without the possibility of parole. Now, they have their whole lives ahead to ponder over criminal schemes, but without any chance to put them into practice. Thus, through their own efforts, the Polish immigrants traded their dreams of a successful and wealthy life for free prison cells. After the verdict was announced, the victim's mother spoke her final words, describing her daughter as a beautiful young woman. She expressed pride in her daughter's academic accomplishments, having earned a first-class degree from the University of Bath Spa. The mother described her daughter as determined, hardworking, and beautiful, and expressed the difficulty of continuing on without her. She lamented the loss of her daughter's great potential and the happiness she could have experienced, stating that her life was taken away and the family was robbed of her presence. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Young. Jason Young comes from Brevard, North Carolina, where he was born in 1974. He grew up in an ordinary family. After graduating from high school, he became a student at the prestigious State University in the capital of his native state, the city of Raleigh. And after graduating, got a job as a salesman in a large retail chain. At work, Jason Young proved himself to be a valuable and promising employee who could always be relied on. But friends spoke of him as a man who was windy and fickle in relations with the opposite sex. He was fickle and often changed women, for which he got a reputation as a womanizer, which, however, he himself was even proud of. Michelle Marie Fisher was born in New York in February 1977. She was raised with her younger sibling Meredith, with whom they were very close from childhood. Their mother, Linda, spent a lot of time with her adored daughters, tried to support them in everything, and contributed to the development of their abilities and talents. Since her school years, Michelle was fond of law and economics, dreaming of linking her life with this very activity. After graduating from school, she applied to several universities at once, and soon received a positive answer from the capital of North Carolina. The girl diligently studied at the Faculty of Economics and Law, receiving a master's degree in this field. After receiving her diploma, Michelle was hired for a high position in one of the leading accounting firms in the state. Yesterday's student was earning well, fully supporting herself, and making big plans for the future. She decided to celebrate her 24th birthday at one of the most popular entertainment venues in the city with her close friends and colleagues. They were heartily enjoying themselves when some stranger awkwardly turned around and knocked a glass with a cocktail out of the birthday girl's hands. The guy immediately started apologizing and, to make amends, bought Michelle another cocktail. That young man was Jason Young, and the pretty young Michelle immediately caught his eye. He sat down at her table and started a casual conversation, joked a lot, tried to be witty and interesting, and at the end of the evening asked her out on a date. Michelle also liked the casual acquaintance, so she willingly accepted his invitation, deciding that it was fate itself made her a gift on her birthday. The couple began to communicate, and soon they realized that they had a lot in common. They both studied at the same university. Although Jason got his degree 3 years earlier, supported the same hockey team, and were fans of the same music group. Between young people quickly began a romantic relationship. But to live together, let alone get married, was out of the question at the start of his relationship with Michelle. Jason was still living at his parents' house in Brevard, and he would only visit his girlfriend in Raleigh on weekends or meet with her during work trips to the state capital. During one of these meetings, his sweetheart informed him that she was pregnant. This news was a real shock for both of them because neither of them was ready for the birth of a child. They were focused on their careers, confidently climbing the ladder, and did not plan to start a family yet. Jason said so at once, but after some hesitation, Michelle decided that she would not have an abortion and would keep the baby. Jason took about a month to rethink the situation, after which he moved to Raleigh to be near his pregnant girlfriend. After a few more months, the couple officially legalized their relationship, not out of love or pregnancy, but due to Michelle's lack of health insurance. Childbirth would have cost the couple a considerable amount of money, but marriage gave them the opportunity to avoid such expenses. The couple's daughter, Young, was born in the spring of 2004. She was given the name Cassidy Elizabeth. The newly married mother went headlong into domestic life and family chores, and her mother and younger sister helped her with this. It should be noted that Michelle's family coolly accepted her chosen one. They were wary of Jason, but tried to avoid conflicts. In the same year, they with a child moved to their own large house located in a quiet and landscaped area of the city. Mother Linda, who came to visit her daughter and granddaughter and help with the household, was the first to notice that there was a certain tense atmosphere in this family. Son-in-law Jason was too emotional and could potentially cause a strain right on the spot. But Michelle made every effort to resolve all the argumentative. In public, she behaved like the happiest wife and mother. Only Mother Linda could honestly describe what was truly occurring. An ominous omen occurred when Cassidy was barely 2 years old. Michelle became pregnant again, and she broke the news to her spouse, but he reacted calmly and seemed even happy about it. Soon, the family traveled by car to Brevard to personally inform Jason's parents of the happy news. They came to visit only for the weekend, and on the first day, they celebrated the upcoming addition to their circle of relatives. The next day, leaving their young daughter with her grandparents for a couple of hours, the couple went to a restaurant to celebrate the event together. As the couple was driving home, Jason, who was at the wheel, excessive steering, and the car went off the road and into a ravine. The couple were shaken but sustained only a few abrasions and bruises, and their lives were not in danger. However, Michelle had a miscarriage. Jason, on the other hand, took the news surprisingly calmly. The accident, the loss of a child, and some strange indifference of the husband, all this looked very suspicious. Later, Linda Fisher would call that accident a bad omen that no one paid proper attention to at the time. They had a mutual friend named Michelle Manny, whom they had known since their days at the same university. For some time, they did not see each other, but in the spring of 2006, shortly before the accident, Jason, during a work trip, accidentally met an old acquaintance. He told his wife about it, and together they decided to invite Manny to visit him. The young woman willingly accepted the invitation, but during her visit, she began to complain about her unhappy family life and problems in her relationship with her husband. At the same time, she constantly praised Jason and told his wife how lucky she was. Jason had frequently flirted with various women in the past, but this particular relationship quickly evolved beyond mere flirtation and friendly support. Jason Young and Michelle Manny started calling each other almost daily and secretly meeting up. Jason consistently explained his absences as being due to business trips, and his wife remained unaware of the truth. In the summer of 2006, Michelle informed her husband that she was pregnant again, but this time Jason was not happy at all. The wife did not understand what was happening. She felt that the beloved was away from her, but believed that this was due to the miscarriage that occurred a few months ago. Jason himself all this time was thinking hard about how to get rid of marital bonds with the least loss to himself. In early November, when Michelle was 5 months pregnant, her husband had another business trip. He traveled 300 miles away from home in his own car, but had booked a hotel room about halfway through the trip. That evening, a pregnant Michelle had a long conversation with her best friend on the phone, telling her about problems in the family and mentioning that she had had a big fight with her husband the night before he left. After the conversation, she went upstairs, put her daughter to bed and fell asleep next to her. About 10 in the evening, Jason reached the hotel and, as he claimed to be tired from the road, went straight to bed. In reality, he was scrutinizing all the entrances, exits, and the location of the security cameras, planning how to leave the hotel and then return undetected, preparing an ironclad alibi for what he thought would be the perfect crime. In the early morning hours, Jason called his wife's sister to ask for help. He said he wanted to give his wife a piece of jewelry for their wedding anniversary, but he had accidentally sent a page from an online store to the home fax machine. He worried that Michelle would see his gift and there would be no surprise. Meredith, though she disliked her son-in-law, still agreed to help him. The police chiefs of Wake County received a 911 call at 1:30 p.m. from 5108 Birchleaf Drive, the Enchanted Oaks area, after Meredith Fisher found her sister Michelle lying face down in a pool of blood in her bedroom. Fisher told the 911 dispatcher that she thinks her sister is dead. It looks like there are bloody footprints all over the house, like the little footprints of Michelle's daughter. Michelle Young died from severe injuries, having been struck in the head at least 10 times during a struggle. When Meredith arrived at her sister's house, she entered through a secret door in the garage that only family members knew about, and that was always unlocked. The house was suspiciously quiet, although the landlady's papers, keys, and wallet were in the hallway, indicating that she hadn't gone anywhere. When she went upstairs, Meredith saw that the bedroom door was wide open, but neither her sister nor her niece answered her call. When she walked into the room, she was met with a horrifying sight. Michelle lay on the floor next to the bed with a fractured skull, in a pool of her own blood. Blood was everywhere. On the walls, the furniture, and bloody child-sized footprints were visible next to the body. Sadly, there was nothing that could be done for the pregnant woman, as she had been dead for hours. Her sister quickly called for emergency assistance. Suddenly, she heard rustling under the bed, looked there, and saw little Cassidy, who looked at her incomprehensibly. Cassidy was not hurt, but she was frightened. The girl saw her mother's death and afterwards spent many hours by her body, as evidenced by the marks on the floor as well as the toys she brought to her mother. Later, forensic experts found a huge number of bruises, abrasions, and fractures on the body of the deceased, which spoke of a long and brutal beating. Michelle's teeth were knocked out, and her skull was fractured with a blunt, heavy object. Later, this instrument of crime was never found. A bloody pillow was lying next to the body, and the marks indicated that the victim had been smothered with it. Nothing was stolen from the house, which means that the night visitor had only one goal: murder. In addition, the locks had not been broken, and there were no signs of forced entry, indicating that the perpetrator had a key or knew about the secret door, which again was known only to family members. In such cases, the main suspect is typically the spouse of the deceased, but in this instance, the individual had an apparently flawless alibi. He asserted that he checked into his hotel room and did not depart until the following morning, when he attended a scheduled business meeting. A review of the records confirmed that Jason had used his room keycard in the evening to enter and in the morning to exit. However, a thorough investigation subsequently uncovered a multitude of irregularities and contradictions. For example, a hotel employee discovered early in the morning that the emergency exit was not only open, but also propped up with a cobblestone to prevent the door from slamming shut. When the investigation decided to check the surveillance camera pointed at that door to find out who had done it, it turned out that this very same camera had been deliberately disabled on the night of the crime. Moreover, It stopped recording about half an hour after Jason checked into his room. The weirdness didn't end there. It turned out that during the night, a man who looked like Jason was getting gas at a station between the hotel and the crime scene, but during the night, he was asked to provide identification as per the rules. He refused to do so, paid cash, and without waiting, quickly left the gas station. The attendant at the inquest identified Jason Young, but the man continued to deny everything, insisting that he had slept in his hotel room during the night. Another oddity was that on the day before the tragedy, Jason called Michelle more than 24 times, and closer to morning, he called his mistress 5 more times, with each conversation lasting no more than 15 seconds. This suggests that Jason was probably panicking, and all of these calls were made outside the hotel, where he, in his own words, had been all night. He was also late for a scheduled business meeting with his partners, and looked somewhat confused. However, none of this evidence, either individually or all of them together, proved that Jason had indeed massacred his pregnant wife. Years of investigation and a long-awaited verdict. For almost 3 years, Jason lived the life he'd always lived. Moreover, he achieved custody of his young daughter, which was a serious blow to the relatives of his dead wife. By that time, he stopped hiding his relationship with Manny, who was once friends with the murdered Michelle, which only increased suspicion that it was Jason who committed this brutal crime. Jason was arrested only at the end of 2009, but then, despite the large amount of evidence to prove his guilt, the case failed because the jury did not come to a consensus. However, the case was reopened in 2012 when more evidence was collected, and the testimony of witnesses who saw Jason Young that night outside the hotel in different places, in particular, his rather conspicuous white car, was seen parked on the night of the murder, not far from his own house in an unlit lot, was also included in the case. Also included in the case was the testimony of a child psychologist who told of little Cassidy's strange doll play, during which the girl showed how her daddy spanked her mom, and then she would not get up off the floor. Mani took the stand as a witness in court. She confessed that Jason had cheated on his wife with her, but justified it by saying that he was deeply unhappy in his family life, as he told everyone. Another former mistress of the defendant admitted that she was afraid of his outbursts of anger when he lost control and could hit her. After a long trial, Jason Young was finally found guilty of brutally assaulting his pregnant wife. For this crime, he was sent to prison for life with no right to ever be released. In 2014, convicted Jason filed his first appeal, but it was denied. In 2018, he again asked for a review of his case, but a panel of the State Court of Appeals again denied it. Cassidy was virtually orphaned. Her mother was murdered and her father went to prison for the crime. The girl is being raised by her aunt and maternal grandparents. On November 9, 2006, the body of Michelle Young was laid to rest. This marked the end of a chapter in her life. Michelle Young's death caused a lot of commotion and uproar in the community, as the reasons and circumstances leading to her death. Both locals and strangers felt saddened and outraged that a precious life had departed so suddenly. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Jake Wagner. The case involving the crime against 8 members of the Roden family became one of the most notorious and complex in Ohio overnight. The motto "all for one and one for all" became fatal for each family member. Only the minor children were spared from the mass violence. The investigation spanned over 10 states in the USA. Detectives conducted more than 600 interviews, gathering around 700 witness statements. Various theories were considered, including self-harm, retaliation by illegal substance dealers, and cult sacrifices. Attorney General Mike DeWine even suspected local residents of withholding crucial information. It seemed the investigation had hit a dead end until a moment came when a solution lying on the surface became apparent. As it turns out, the most complex situations are often rooted in simplicity. This story illustrates how familial bonds turned into a bloodbath in Pike County, Ohio, USA. It all began with a simple crush. Hannah Mae Roden was 13 years old when she met 18-year-old Edward Jake Wagner. The young man invited her to the prom, and from that evening on, they were inseparable. Their relationship elicited mixed feelings. Undoubtedly, the love that blossomed between them was evident. However, the age difference raised concerns and doubts. Nevertheless, the young couple's parents did not obstruct their relationship, for they had all been young once. Over time, the Rodens and Wagners started spending weekends and parties together. Their love was passionate and carefree. When Hannah turned 15, she announced her pregnancy. Upon hearing the news, Jake was overjoyed. He anticipated how delighted his family would be with the new addition. The Wagners highly valued traditions and lineage, hence they adored children, as they saw the continuation of their lineage in them. Even ancestral names were passed down from generation to generation. Jake's father was named George Wagner III, and his brother George Wagner IV. The Rodens, on the other hand, had a simpler, less ostentatious approach to children, but this did not diminish their family values. Christopher and Dana Roden, Hannah's parents, remained very close and united even after their divorce. They loved their 3 children and dedicated their lives to their well-being. Unlike the Wagners, the Roden family had a modest income. 40-year-old Christopher worked as a handyman at the Big Bear Lake family complex, while 37-year-old Dana was a nurse's aide at a youth rehabilitation center. Nevertheless, they managed to instill humanity and diligence in Christopher Jr., Hannah, and Clarence Frankie. Everyone was thrilled about the arrival of little Sophie. To celebrate her birthday, a grand party was organized. Soon after, Jake suggested that Hannah move in with him and his family, arguing that it would make life more comfortable for both of them. His logic seemed sound, given that they were living in a house. However, Hannah declined the invitation. By that time, she had come to understand her partner better and saw the invitation as an attempt to limit her independence. Moreover, the once caring and attentive young man had become suspicious and aggressive. Jake had resorted to physical aggression on several occasions, and his rough behavior had cooled Hannah's feelings for him. Hannah's refusal became a point of contention for the Wagners. Both of Sophie's parents were determined to gain full custody of the girl, and the families began to advocate for their own interests. Driven by his desire, Jake went as far as to threaten Hannah, telling her that if necessary, he would take Sophie by force, claiming that if she truly loved her, she would have handed the girl over to be raised in a healthy environment. Jake believed that the Rodens posed a danger to Sophie, and these discussions continued for 2 years, during which he became more tyrannical. Hannah grew weary of the excessive control, and in March 2015, she completely terminated the relationship. Additionally, she had come to learn something disturbing. It transpired that Jake's brother, George IV, had obtained custody of a son by threatening the boy's mother with a weapon. This confirmed that the Wagners viewed moral and physical coercion as acceptable methods to safeguard their interests. Roden decided to distance herself from the situation. She wanted to raise her daughter alone while working as a nurse's assistant and finishing school. The situation worsened when everyone learned about Hannah's second pregnancy, although she claimed the child was from another man. Jake had his doubts and attempted to find out if she was seeing someone else. So in December 2015, he accessed her social media accounts, but found no evidence of infidelity. At the end of his investigation, he discovered that the woman was communicating with Georgia Ford's former mother-in-law, which piqued his genuine interest. A court case soon followed, during which the Wagner family repeatedly interacted with the woman. "They'll have to get rid of me before they can take custody of my daughter," Hannah wrote in her message. Jake shared the details of the correspondence with his family, which enraged them. Then your maternal grandmother, Rita Newcomb, aged 65, forged an important document about custody. Furthermore, during a court session to determine the granddaughter's residence, Christopher Roden and George Wagner III had a serious disagreement. Ultimately, The relationship between the families completely deteriorated. Soon, a terrible idea occurred to the Wagner family. Hannah was so uncooperative that they felt the need to eliminate her, as well as the entire Roden family who could claim custody of Sophie. This insane thought turned into a monstrous plan that solidified by Christmas 2016. People's thoughts during the festive season are usually focused on love and creation, which cannot be said for the Wagner couple who organized a vote. It was decided whether they would implement their plan. All family members agreed, and the only thing left was to assign roles and prepare. 5 months were spent studying the Roden family's homes and surveillance cameras, with a particular focus on their daily routines and work schedules. Each person involved in the criminal plot had a specific role. For instance, Angela Wagner purchased sneakers for all family members to wear at a predetermined time, preventing the victims from seeking help. She also obtained a device to block communication, planning to secretly install it on the Roden family's phones to minimize noise. George III suggested making homemade silencers. He also arranged the transportation on the night of the crime, aiming to secure a van that would not draw attention. Sophie was to remain safe at home with Angela, as the court had granted Hannah and Jake joint custody of the child. The Wagners chose a time when it was their turn to look after the girl, meticulously planning every detail for a flawless execution. On the night of April 21, 2016, George Wagner III decided to visit Christopher Roden, allegedly to offer him a job opportunity that could improve his financial situation. The job offer was just a pretext to gain access to the house. Unsuspectingly, Roden Sr. opened the door on the morning of April 22, 2016. At about 8 p.m., Bobby Jo Manley, Dana Roden's sister, entered Christopher's house. She did this daily since the day he had offered her a job. Bobby took care of the animals belonging to the Roden family. She noticed someone was inside, which was unusual for that time when everyone typically went about their business. Inside the house, in a pool of blood, lay Christopher and 38-year-old Gary, his cousin. The men lived together. Horrified, she grabbed the phone and dialed emergency services, reporting what she had seen and requesting assistance at 477 Union Hill Road. Shocked, Bobby proceeded to the homes of other relatives. She knocked loudly on one of their doors, and soon, a 3-year-old boy, Clarence Roden's son, appeared. She asked him where his parents were, but the boy did not respond, only pointing towards the bed. Entering the house, she screamed at the sight of 20-year-olds Clarence and Hannah Hazel, his wife. The couple was deceased, with their 6-month-old baby stirring between them, alive but splattered with the blood of his parents. After Bobby's emergency call, the police immediately rushed to the specified address. As they approached the Roden family's property, they were stopped by a concerned neighbor, who urged them to check 2 more addresses where other family members resided. The neighbor's suspicion was correct, and in the 3rd house, the police discovered the bloodied bodies of the victims, 19-year-old Hannah, 16-year-old Christopher, and their relative Dana. Remarkably, the attackers had spared the life of Hannah's youngest child, a baby girl. Only a few days later, another victim was discovered, 44-year-old Kenneth, the elder Roden's brother, who lived a 15-minute walk from the others. By 2 p.m., 8 victims had been identified: Christopher, Dana, Clarence, Hannah, Hazel, Christopher Jr., Hannah Mae, Kenneth, and Gary. The only survivors were small children, a 3-year-old, a 6-month-old baby, and a newborn just 4 days old, along with 2-year-old Sophie, who was at the Wagner home at the time of the incident. After examining the bodies, the police concluded that all the victims had been killed in their sleep by gunshot wounds. Detectives later pieced together the events of that night. The patriarch of the family was awake when the attackers burst into the house, as evidenced by a wound on his right arm. Christopher attempted to defend himself but was hit with 9 shots to the head, torso, and limbs. 5 bullets were removed from Dana Roden's neck and head, and the rest of the family was killed by gunshots to the head. Gary was shot 5 times, Christopher Jr. was shot 4 times, Clarence and his wife Hannah were shot 3 times each, and Hannah Mae was shot twice. Kenneth was the only one to be shot once. In total, the assailant fired 32 shots, some even after the victims had died. In addition, bruises were found on some of the bodies, indicating physical abuse. Since no one in the vicinity heard anything, investigators concluded that the perpetrators used silencers, suggesting a carefully planned and executed act. It was clear that the victims were not randomly selected. Someone wanted to take revenge on the entire family. During the search, the police found 5 Remington shell casings of different types and an unused bullet from a different model of gun. Leonard Manley, Dana's father, claimed that the criminals were familiar with the rodents, or else the dogs would have been barking all over the place. The question of who committed such an act kept the police officers busy. The Attorney General's office provided more than $20,000 for the funeral of the Roden family. The deceased were interred in several stages on April 28, 2016. Gary was the first of the victims to be buried in South Shore, Kentucky, followed by Hannah Hazel, whose funeral was held on May 1st in the village of Atway, Coteau County, Ohio. The other victims were buried on May 3rd in West Portsmouth, in the same county. As for the fate of the surviving children, they were placed in the care of relatives. A wave of panic swept through the neighborhood, and the police urged the relatives of the Rodens to take necessary precautions and advised all residents of Pike to stay away from their homes at night. The cold-blooded mass murder outraged residents across the state, who demanded that the results of the investigation be made public and that the perpetrators be apprehended as soon as possible. Cincinnati businessman Jeff Ruby offered $25,000 for information that would help arrest and convict those involved in the murder, but he later declined the reward offer. No less than 100 individuals were part of the investigative task force working on the Roden case. Following the funerals, as part of the investigation, 3 houses belonging to the slain family were towed away the following day, and several more vehicles met the same fate, all transported to a secure facility. This was done to preserve evidence and protect the personal belongings of the deceased. After the investigation, the family's cars and farming equipment were planned to be returned to the victims' relatives. Forensic specialists joined the investigation, and the house were meticulously examined. However, no DNA of the suspects was found in any of them. Cameras had been installed in the mobile homes, but they too provided no information, as they had been disabled. Those who planned the crime had thought through every detail meticulously. It seemed there were no significant leads until detectives discovered something. Cannabis crops were found at 3 crime scenes in one location. There were about 200 plants. Officers believed the cannabis was grown for sale, not personal use, leading to speculation about the involvement of Mexican drug traffickers. However, the amount of cannabis found was too small to suggest an attack by an entire cartel. In January 2017, a close relative of the Roden family was arrested for drug trafficking, which was considered an unexpected circumstance. Leonard Manley stated that his daughter, Dana, had no involvement with the cannabis operations. "They're trying to tarnish Dana's reputation, and I don't like it," he asserted. Some family members confirmed that Christopher and Kenneth Roden, the older brothers, grew marijuana, but were unaware of any large-scale cultivation. The theory of a family feud over criminally obtained money was also debunked, alongside the discovery of prohibited substances, specialized equipment for breeding chickens for fighting, and cages with fighting equipment found at the Rodens' residence. It soon became clear that illegal fights were not the cause of the homicide. Months went by without uncovering the true motive behind the crime. On April 13, 2017, local authorities announced they lacked sufficient evidence to make any arrests. Nevertheless, prosecutor Rob Young stated the investigation was ongoing, suggesting they had some leads they were not yet ready to disclose. Another year passed, and the second anniversary of the mass crime received little attention, with no coverage in the local press, and neither the sheriff nor the prosecutor attending the memorial service. This led the community to believe the investigation had stalled. Unexpectedly, on May 12, 2017, a SWAT team raided a home in Pike County, located 10 miles from the crime scene. Their initial search was for suspects, but they later revealed that they were gathering evidence. Detectives also searched a house in Adams County that had previously been owned by Jake Wagner, though he had sold it by that time. On June 20th, 2017, the investigation publicly shifted focus to the Wagner family. 26-year-old Jake, 27-year-old George III, 47-year-old George IV, and 48-year-old Angela, who lived 15 miles from the victims. The Wagners had moved to Kali, Alaska, citing difficulties staying in the area. They claimed to have loved the Roden family, stating their deaths caused them immense suffering. Rob Young's words from a year earlier proved true, as the investigation had made a breakthrough and was now seeking information from the public on the Wagners' discussions about firearms, ammunition, vehicles, etc. 2 years prior. It wasn't long before the suspects, running low on funds, returned to Ohio, where detectives had gathered enough evidence for arrests, including proving that Jake had hacked into Hannah's account. During the examination of the Wagner family's devices, research related to guardianship was discovered. It was also found that Angela had purchased athletic shoes for the entire family just a few weeks before the crime, and the sole pattern of one of these matched the one found at one of the crime scenes. The officers believed that Angela was the mastermind behind the horrific scheme, with Jake as the primary executor. According to the investigation, each family member was involved in the criminal act. On November 13, 2018, the Attorney General announced the arrest of the Wagner couple, as well as their sons. They were charged with planning and carrying out the termination of life. Rita Newcomb, Angela's 65-year-old mother, and Frida Wagner, George III's mother, were also arrested. They faced charges of perjury and obstructing justice in 2019. Rita Newcomb underwent handwriting analysis, which proved her involvement in forging a guardianship document for Sophie. Later, to avoid imprisonment, she struck a plea deal. The charges against Frederica Wagner were dropped in June 2019, but the other Wagner remained incarcerated, having refused to cooperate with the investigation. They denied any involvement in the deaths of the Rodens and expressed sorrow over their passing, wishing for the real perpetrators to be caught. On April 22, 2021, 5 years after the tragic incident, Jake decided to make a deal with the prosecution. The agreement was that he would disclose details of the crime in exchange for all family members receiving life sentences instead of the death penalty. Wagner Jr. admitted to taking the lives of 5 out of 8 individuals, thus pleading guilty to 23 criminal charges, including 8 counts of aggravated crime. The remaining charges included burglary, conspiracy, illegal possession of dangerous ammunition, forgery of evidence and documents, interception of telegrams and oral messages, unauthorized use of property, obstruction of justice, involvement in corrupt activities, and unlawful intimate conduct with a young woman. He indicated that eliminating the mother was seen as the only way to secure custody of his daughter, and he felt compelled to do the same to the other family members, fearing they would seek vengeance and refuse to relinquish the girl. The next to stand trial was Angela on September 10th. She pled guilty to conspiracy to commit aggravated crime, robbery, and evidence tampering. She also agreed to testify against the other defendants. In exchange, the charge of ending a life was dropped, and she was sentenced to 30 years in prison. The trial of George Wagner's fourth began on August 28, 2022. The man denied any involvement in the crimes, insisting he was completely unaware. In contrast, the prosecution argued that he participated in planning, executing, and concealing the crimes. Ultimately, George IV was found guilty on 22 counts and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The trial for George III is scheduled for February 2024. Despite his entire family being convicted, he continues to claim innocence, likely facing the same fate as his older son. This once harmonious relationship ended in tragedy. The collective madness of the Wagner is beyond understanding and forgiveness. Their actions left 3 children orphaned, What will become of Sophie when she grows up and realizes what happened in their fight for custody and a facade of well-being? The Wagner deprived the young girl of loving parents, relatives, and a peaceful life. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Gabby Doolin. Gabby Doolin was born on December 26, 2007, in the small town of Scottsville, Kentucky, with a population of just over 4,000 people. Scottsville was mostly a farming community where many folks knew each other well, or at least knew someone from each local family. Like in many similar small towns, there weren't a lot of entertainment options in Scottsville. The only major thing for locals was school sports, particularly football. The local school had pretty decent fields for football, baseball, and tennis, where they regularly hosted games and competitions. It became a sort of tradition for locals to attend these activities, especially if their children were involved. Gabby's family was no different. Her parents had 3 kids, 2 sons and a daughter. The oldest boy was on the school's football team, while Gabby herself got into cheerleading in November 2015 when she was 7. Their town was gearing up for the biggest football game of the year, and Gabby's older brother was on the team. However, Gabby was more interested in just hanging out and having fun with other kids than in the game itself. Her parents initially planned to leave Gabby at home with their youngest son under the care of a relative, but Gabby managed to convince them to take her with them. On the evening of November 14th, they headed to the school field. Besides the local crowd, there were also many folks from the other county who came to watch the game and support their team. As soon as their family arrived at the stadium, Gabby spotted her friends and asked her mom if she could go play with them. Her mom agreed, but warned her to stay within the school grounds and stick with the other kids. After that, her mom went to the bleachers and Gabby ran off to her friends. From then on, Gabby dashed back and forth to her mom a few times before going off to play again. At some point, she also came to her dad, who was in an announcement room, and Gabby asked him for some money to buy some snacks at the concession stand before darting away. Sometime later, Gabby's friends ran up to her mom in the bleachers. She glanced at the group and immediately noticed her daughter wasn't among them. The girls asked if she had seen Gabby, and they seemed visibly worried. The woman replied that she hadn't seen her for quite a while. She then asked what was going on, and the girls explained they had decided to play hide and seek. Gabby was supposed to find them, and they hid in the restroom, but time passed, and Gabby never found them. Thinking they had won, the girls left their hiding spot and went to look for her, but Gabby was nowhere to be found. They called her name, checked all the places they had been playing before, but their friend seemed to have vanished into thin air. That's when they thought Gabby might have gone to the bleachers to her mom and ran there. Her mother immediately started to panic and went to her husband, but Gabby wasn't there either. She told him that Gabby was missing, and he rushed to search the area around the stadium. Meanwhile, the mother went to the concession stand where her daughter had wanted to buy some snacks and began searching for her there. On the way, the parents met their friends and informed them about their daughter's disappearance. Hearing that, they joined the worried parents, helping with the search. After scouring the entire area around the stadium and finding no sign of Gabby, the parents went back and made an announcement over the loudspeakers, hoping Gabby would hear it. But that yielded no results either. By that time, there was a break in the game and people were returning to the bleachers. The parents continued asking everyone if they had seen Gabby, and some of them joined in the search as well. They went out again to search the area around the stadium and asked the staff to turn on flashlights around the baseball field, which led to a small forest. The adults walked through it, but still couldn't find her. By this time, about 20 minutes had passed since her disappearance, and the parents decided to call the police. Officers immediately arrived at the school, listened to the parents' and Gabby's friends' accounts, and began searching. The local police department had little experience with such serious cases, as child disappearances rarely occurred in their small town. The officers immediately considered the worst-case scenario that someone had abducted or attacked her. In that case, they faced one problem. The likely perpetrator was probably at the stadium watching the game, which was about to end any minute. So the officers realized they had very little time, and soon people would start going home, including the alleged perpetrator. Eventually, they decided to halt the game and lock down the stadium, keeping everyone inside the building. Officers watched every exit to prevent anyone from slipping away. The police didn't inform people about what was happening to avoid disrupting the search efforts. If everyone knew that the police were considering the possibility that a kidnapper of a 7-year-old girl was in the same vicinity as them, the situation could quickly escalate. Meanwhile, state police arrived at the school and began searching the area. They reached the baseball field and headed into the woods. After some distance into the trees, they stumbled upon a small creek and saw her body in it. They identified her as Gabby and called for an ambulance to take the body to the medical examiner. However, even a visual inspection was enough to suggest that the cause of death was asphyxiation, as there were distinct marks on her neck. Part of her clothing was also missing, leading the police to suspect that the victim had been sexually assaulted. Gabby's mother saw the ambulance near the woods and thought the police had found her daughter who needed medical attention. She rushed there, but the police stopped her, as they didn't want the woman to see this horrifying scene. Now that the police were dealing with a murder, they decided to move everyone from the stadium to the school gym. Investigators believed that the killer was likely among them, so they needed to quickly figure out how to identify them. They spoke to Gabby's parents and told them about what likely happened to their daughter. Investigators also asked if they had any suspicions about who could have committed such a heinous act. Perhaps they had noticed someone suspicious, or someone had threatened their family. But Gabby's parents insisted they had no idea who could have done this. Detectives then talked to Gabby's friends and asked if they had seen anything strange that evening. Maybe someone had been watching or following them. But the girls said they couldn't recall anything like that. The police also brought them to the gym and asked them to look carefully at the people present, hoping they might remember something, but it didn't lead to anything. The lead detective continued to believe that the victim's friends might have seen the kidnapper, but either they were afraid to point him out or simply didn't understand the significance of their observations due to their age. He kept asking them to remember every moment of that evening, and finally, one of them mentioned that when they hid from Gabby in the restroom, she saw a man near the door. She remembered almost no details about his appearance except that he was wearing a denim jacket. The police spoke to the cashier who sold tickets to the game, and he also recalled the man with the denim jacket hanging on his arm. He added that this person seemed strange and intoxicated to him. However, they still couldn't identify this man. At that moment, the police gradually interviewed the attendees of the game, and pretty soon, everyone learned why they were being held there. Realizing that they might be in the same room with the killer, people were frightened, especially for their kids, but still cooperated with the police and answered their questions. Investigators cross-referenced the list of names of all the men in the gym with a sex offenders registry, but there were no matches. The police also sent officers to the homes of several such offenders living within close proximity, but they all had solid alibis, and none of them were near the school. Meanwhile, officers continued to interview people at the school, and they soon came across some interesting leads. Several individuals told them that during the game they saw a man named Timothy Madden near the women's restroom behaving strangely. He was a local resident, so many people knew him, but according to witnesses, that evening he was acting suspiciously. They also mentioned that he was wearing a denim jacket, the same description provided by one of Gabby's friends who had also seen a man near the restroom. Another witness was a distant relative of Timothy. He mentioned that during the game, Timothy seemed kind of off, and his younger son was playing on the field, but according to the witness, Timothy, who usually was very involved in his son's sports achievements, wasn't even paying attention to the field and seemed lost. Several more witnesses told the police that Timothy's behavior seemed strange to them, prompting investigators to talk to him. It was already nighttime, and they had to release almost everyone from the school. They decided to visit him, but first asked the local sheriff what he thought about Timothy. The sheriff said that he had known him practically all his life and highly doubted that he was capable of such a crime. Timothy had almost no criminal record except for some traffic fines, and he had never been involved in any suspicious situations before. Timothy lived with his wife and 5 children, and the police decided to go talk to him immediately. When they knocked on his door, Timothy opened it, and the officers asked if he knew why they were there. He replied that he had heard about her murder, but had nothing to do with it. Detectives then decided to try one trick and asked him a loaded question. They asked whether he had any explanation for several videos provided by eyewitnesses, showing him talking to Gabby shortly before her murder. There were no videos or witnesses, and the question was designed to prompt the man to reveal some new information if he indeed had something to do with the crime. At first, Timothy said he didn't know, but then he quickly corrected himself. He admitted that he did talk to Gabby that evening near the stadium. According to him, he stepped out to smoke, and at that moment, several girls ran past him. Shortly after, Gabby passed by and asked if he had seen her friends because they were playing hide and seek, and she needed to find them. Timothy pointed her in the right direction, and she ran off. The detectives found it suspicious how quickly Timothy changed his story. Moreover, his account indicated that he spoke to the victim just minutes before her disappearance, and at that time, there were no witnesses outside the stadium, so it gave him the opportunity to commit the crime. The detectives also asked if he would have any explanation if they found his DNA on the victim's body, and Timothy calmly replied no. Finally, they asked him to provide them with a DNA sample and the clothing he wore at the stadium. He agreed to both requests, but as soon as Timothy handed over the clothing to the police, they discovered some stains on it. There was something resembling blood stains on the pants, denim jacket, and even underwear. Detectives asked if he could explain it, and Timothy claimed that they were insane and that it wasn't blood, but some dirt. However, the police thought otherwise, although they needed to wait for the DNA analysis results before they could arrest him. Even though this case was a priority for the lab, it still took several days for the experts to examine all the samples and conduct the analysis. The forensic pathologist soon finished examining the body and confirmed that Gabby's cause of death was manual strangulation. He also confirmed that the victim had been brutally assaulted and extracted a biological sample of the perpetrator, which was sent to the laboratory the day after the murder. Something unexpected happened. The police received an anonymous letter from someone who reported a suspicious individual present at the game. The author wrote down the model of his car and even the license plate, which allowed the investigators to quickly identify the owner of the vehicle. It turned out to be a student living half an hour's drive from Scottsville. The police went there and began questioning him, but the guy claimed he hadn't been to any game and hadn't even heard of the murder. He added that he was at work that evening, and the police found undoubtful confirmation of his alibi. He was crossed off the list of suspects, but the author of the letter was never found. Perhaps someone decided to frame him or play a cruel prank, but the guy was truly innocent. The police soon received another lead. Several people reported strange behavior by a local 16-year-old boy. He told different people that he had been at the game, but then claimed he hadn't attended it. The young man also mentioned seeing girls playing hide and seek. Detectives found out that this boy was Timothy Madden's son, but that wasn't the most surprising revelation. They learned that just 2 weeks before the murder, the boy had become angry with his father and held a knife to his throat, threatening to kill him. Knowing this information, the police headed to speak with him. But there was a problem. They needed the presence of the minor's parents, and his mother refused to provide a DNA sample, leaving the police empty-handed. In Scottsville, a small town where everyone knew each other, rumors spread like wildfire. People heard that the police were looking into the Madden family regarding Gabby's murder, sparking various theories. Some thought one of Madden's troubled older sons could be responsible, while others suspected Madden himself or thought he might be covering for his sons. Gabby's parents also became aware of these rumors, which came as a big shock to them. Gabby's father had known Timothy since 3rd grade and also knew his whole family. Their sons played on the same football team, and their daughters were cheerleading together. Both families were close, even sitting near each other at the game. With all this in mind, Gabby's parents found it hard to believe that anyone from their circle could have been involved in the murder. After the rumors spread around town, something else happened. The eldest son of the Madden family, who was 20 years old, began contacting local officers on social media. He used foul language and threatened them, demanding they leave his family alone. He was immediately arrested for the threats, and the police quickly discovered that there was an active warrant for his arrest in another town. It turned out he was suspected of assaulting a minor girl. They brought him in for questioning, and the young man claimed he was simply frustrated by the accusations against his family. He also said he had nothing to do with the murder and that he was at his cousin's house in the neighboring town that evening. He agreed to provide his DNA sample, which was also sent to the laboratory on November 20th. 6 days after the murder, Gabby's funeral took place. Hundreds of people came to say goodbye, not only from Scottsville, but also from other towns. People donated a significant amount of money to Gabby's parents to help cover the funeral and farewell ceremony expenses. Meanwhile, the lab completed the DNA analysis and compared the blood and semen samples with Timothy and his son's DNA. The results showed a complete match. The semen found on the victim's body belonged to Timothy Madden, and the blood on his clothes belonged to Gabby. Upon receiving this news, detectives went to the funeral when Gabby's parents were alone and informed them of the discovery of the killer. At the same time, the police officers went to Timothy's house and he was arrested. As he was being transported from the police station, he shouted to the gathered reporters that he was innocent. Later, he claimed that the blood on his clothes was his own, as he had scratched himself passing by a fence, even though initially he had told the police that it wasn't blood at all but mud. With the DNA match in hand, the investigators took the case to court and the prosecution stated they would seek the death penalty. During the trial preparation, Timothy's lawyer insisted his client was innocent and that the origin of the evidence raised serious questions. He argued that during the supposed murder, Timothy was at the stadium filming the game, even though Timothy himself had told the police he saw Gabby around the same time. The lawyer also tried to point out the fact that Gabby's body was found in a creek, but his client's clothes were dry when he returned to the stadium. Timothy's mother, who lived with him, stated that Timothy returned home in clean clothes, didn't look troubled, and behaved as usual. However, the prosecution pointed out that all these arguments crumbled in the face of the fact that the suspect's semen was found on the victim's body. There could be no other explanation for this, and therefore, there was no doubt about Timothy's involvement. According to the police, his account of that evening contains some portion of the truth. He could have indeed stepped out of the stadium during the game and encountered Gabby, who was looking for her friends. She knew Timothy well because he was the father of one of her friends. She might have approached him and asked where the other girls had gone, and that's when he devised a plan. He could have said they ran into the woods behind the baseball field and offered to escort Gabby there. Once they were a few hundred yards away from the school, he could have assaulted and killed her, then returned to the game. The wait for the trial dragged on for years, much to Gabby's family's dismay. They wanted the murderer to be punished, but due to bureaucracy, the case progressed slowly. In 2019, 4 years after the murder, the parties began discussing a possible plea deal. The prosecution offered to drop the death penalty in exchange for a life sentence. with Timothy having to admit his guilt. Gabby's parents agreed to this option because the endless wait for the trial was a heavy burden for them. Moreover, if the trial finally began, they would have to attend hearings for months, essentially reliving their daughter's death all over again. Timothy, who kept insisting on his innocence, eventually agreed and confessed. However, the terms of the deal didn't require him to reveal the details of what he did. He just had to admit his guilt. These terms didn't satisfy Gabby's family because they wanted the perpetrator to fully confess to what he had done to their daughter. During the court hearing, Gabby's father started yelling at Timothy, while the defendant's relatives began shouting at Gabby's family. Eventually, the judge had to take a break and separate them. In the end, Timothy received a life sentence and went to serve it in a maximum security prison. But that's not all. In 2016, a year after Gabby's murder, something else happened involving Timothy Madden. A boy from a neighboring state saw a news report about the crime and recognized Timothy. Several years ago, he and his friend were walking near a mall parking lot when an adult man approached them. He tried to convince the boys to get into his car for a ride, but they found the offer extremely strange and ran away from him. The friend's relative contacted the police, and according to the boy who saw the news report, he was no other than Timothy Madden. However, there was no substantial evidence for this case, so it didn't progress any further. Nevertheless, if Timothy had indeed attempted to abduct two boys in another state, it could tell us about his true nature more clearly. Perhaps before Gabby's murder, he had been trying to find other victims but had no success. And on that evening when she approached him near the stadium, he decided to seize the opportunity to satisfy his horrific fantasies. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carol Carroll. Carol Carroll, a young mother and actress in the adult film industry, is a stark example of the perils that pursuing fame and money in this field can bring. She did not consider her work immoral. Her goal was to achieve financial independence and eventually retire once she had saved enough to support herself and her young son. Tragically, however, she was never able to leave the industry, and who once admired by thousands of fans, was eventually discovered dismembered on a rocky cliff beside a road. Carol Nicole Carroll was born on September 19, 1995, in a small Italian province. She was the only child of her parents, Fabio and Josephine, who had Italian maternal roots and Dutch paternal heritage. When she was just 4 years old, her parents decided to divorce, and she stayed with her mother. Subsequently, her father moved back to his homeland, the Netherlands, remarried, and had more children. Josephine chose to remain in Italy, raising her daughter alone, as her former husband offered little support. They lived in a small community called Cesto Kenda. Carol's mother worked multiple jobs simultaneously to provide her daughter with everything necessary: a good education and the opportunity for a better life. Carol grew up to be a beautiful, kind, and sociable girl with many friends and an easy rapport with others. As a schoolgirl, she actively participated in sports, particularly horseback riding, and regularly attended a dance studio. Carol was fluent in 3 languages, loved traveling across Europe, read extensively, and could engage in conversation on almost any subject. As a teenager, she blossomed into a true beauty with a slim, feminine figure, already attracting many admirers and suitors. She reveled in being the center of attention. After finishing school, she enrolled in a technical university to study industrial design, arts, and fashion, where she soon became one of the top students in her class. An unexpected pregnancy during her freshman year led Carol to develop a romantic relationship with a young man a year her senior, who was studying at the Faculty of Architecture and Design. In the fall of 2020, when Carol was 20 years old, she discovered she was pregnant. This news came as a complete surprise to both her and the child's father, as they were both students and utterly unprepared for such a development. Nevertheless, Carol firmly decided to keep the baby. In 2016, the young couple had a son together, and their lives changed drastically. Both had to leave school because they lacked the funds to support themselves and their newborn. The new parents decided to move to Verona, where there were more opportunities to earn a living and provide for their family. Carol got a job as a sales consultant in a large cosmetics and perfume retail chain shortly after her son turned 1, while her boyfriend worked on various projects from home, also taking care of their son. In the middle of 2019, Carol unexpectedly fell for another man named Angelo, with whom she began a passionate affair. The couple secretly met for about 6 months, renting hotel rooms, messaging each other at night, and striving to spend every free moment together. However, just before the new year, the father of Carol's child found out about her relationship and decided to part ways with his unfaithful partner. Carol felt this was for the best since she was planning to leave for her new boyfriend anyway, but then a problem arose. Angelo lived in his parents' house, and Carol couldn't move there with her child from a previous relationship. Therefore, they decided to rent a place together. But at that time, the coronavirus pandemic swept the world, leaving the young couple jobless and unable to afford their own apartment. Carol eventually moved into the home of her new boyfriend's parents and decided to temporarily leave her 4-year-old son with his biological father until the situation stabilized and she could bring him to live with her. Meanwhile, the situation worsened. A widespread self-isolation regime was declared. Everyone was confined to their homes, and Carol faced significant financial difficulties. During this challenging period, Angelo and his parents supported Carol as best they could. She effectively lived at their expense in their home, unable to contribute financially to her young son. Moreover, Carol's mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, which was progressing, and the woman needed costly therapy. Unexpectedly during the lockdown, Carol frantically considered ways to earn money from home to support her son and ill mother. She decided to try earning through social networks and her own YouTube channel, sharing about life in isolation and the challenges she faced. However, this content did not attract much interest, but her attractive appearance as a novice blogger drew attention, earning her compliments and even some inappropriate proposals in the comments. A subscriber suggested she create an account on the platform OnlyFans, noting that her attractive looks would be highly appreciated there, and she could become a star and earn quickly. Carol took this advice and registered on the service under the pseudonym Charlotte Angel. She began creating revealing content, posting her intimate photos and short videos. Quickly, she amassed a significant following willing to pay for such content. Carol soon began earning well but kept from her boyfriend and close relatives how she was making money and what she was being paid for. Over time, her content became more explicit and sophisticated as she strove to please her fans, and she herself enjoyed this line of work. Carol hid the details of her job as long as she could, but about 6 months later, someone she knew stumbled upon her account. Rumors spread, and soon everyone knew how she was making a living. She wasn't too upset and even tried to justify it by claiming that her work was also a form of art that brought in a decent income and fully satisfied her. However, the conservative Italians were not ready to accept this, so friends and close ones gradually turned away from Carol, believing she was engaged in something immoral and associating with her might tarnish their reputations. Carol herself regarded this attitude towards her work as prejudice and was confident that she would achieve success, becoming a wealthy and famous adult film star. Soon, the beauty became so popular that adult film studios took serious interest. Several directors approached the sultry Italian with offers to star in their films, and she readily agreed. She participated in group shoots and public performances. Word of her activities quickly reached Angelo, who naively thought his girlfriend was working remotely as a designer, but sometimes went to the office. He was shocked and at a loss for what to do next, as he hadn't planned on breaking up with her. However, when his parents learned about the situation, they insisted he break up with this fallen woman immediately, lest she disgrace their entire family. By then, Carol had enough money to rent her own place. Her OnlyFans account was extremely popular. She regularly received offers from directors, and her fees kept increasing. In interviews, she claimed she didn't plan to do this all her life and intended to eventually finish her education, and try her hand as a designer or modeler. But for now, she truly enjoyed what she was doing and was well compensated for it. Nonetheless, Carol often spoke about the constant moral pressure from those around her, their judgments, and attempts to shame her, causing certain psychological traumas. She called her work art and advocated for every woman's right to choose her profession without fear of judgment. Attempting to move on, and with a new dominant lover at 25, Carol moved to a small town called Rescaldina in the Milan province, deciding to start over. She planned to leave her career in the adult industry behind and got a job as a sales consultant at a perfume boutique. It seemed she had completely changed her life, but this was only temporary. A few months later, she met a 42-year-old local banker named David Fontana, who was passionate about photography, specializing in nude photography. They met online where he was seeking a model for his explicit projects. Carol responded to his offer, and during their first meeting, the pair felt an immediate mutual attraction. Fontana had been married for many years, but this did not stop him from starting a relationship with the young woman. They began dating, organizing explicit photographic sessions that regularly led to intimacy. Soon, he learned about Carol's past activities and persuaded her to return to filmmaking, recognizing her true talent. David had mixed feelings for her. He loved her, wanted to possess her, but also liked seeing his young lover in adult films. In March 2021, the banker divorced his wife and started living with Carol, realizing their most explicit and sinful fantasies. He helped her create content that was incredibly popular on OnlyFans, but he took a cut of the profits from their joint work. Carol soon became so successful and popular that foreign directors and studios began offering her lucrative contracts for shoots. Fontana was quite jealous in life, reacting sharply when others paid attention to his girlfriend on the street or tried flirting with her. But there were no restrictions or limits when it came to filming. He treated it as a regular job, which the actress was completely comfortable with. A few months later, Angelo called her, confessing he missed her greatly. He proposed they get back together, noting he was ready to accept her line of work and wouldn't interfere or restrict her. Carol was touched but admitted she already had another man. Nevertheless, they continued to communicate, but when David learned about this, he became enraged, threatened Angelo, and even set his car on fire. Angelo immediately reported to the police about the threats to his life and property damage. The authorities issued a restraining order preventing Fontana from approaching Angelo, but no evidence of the banker's involvement in the arson was found, so he did not compensate for the damage. The in-demand actress often flew overseas for shoots, and her subscribers numbered over 30,000. Carol was saving up to buy her own home, take her son with her, and planned to leave the adult film industry, find another job, and focus on raising her son. Meanwhile, she began making custom videos, which proved to be a lucrative business. Fans sent her their own scripts of what they wanted to see, and she brought their fantasies to life for a handsome fee. Fontana continued to help her with filming and editing. They still lived together and shared the profits. In September 2021, Carol met an actor named Salvatore Galdo on a film set, who was her partner in several explicit films. However, real feelings ignited between them, and they started a romantic relationship. They dated secretly, fearing what David might do to her new lover. She waited for the right moment to tell the banker everything and break up with him for good. A few months later, Galdo gave her an engagement ring, asking her to become his lawful wife, and she joyfully accepted. By the end of the year, Carol had saved enough money to buy her own home. She planned to take her son, marry Salvatore, and finally decided to talk to Fontana. The man took the news surprisingly calmly. It seemed he understood everything and was ready to let her go to her new lover, but they still had several unfinished projects for which they had already been paid. They agreed to complete the work and then peacefully part ways forever. The mysterious disappearance of Carol. At the beginning of 2022, Carol unexpectedly vanished. She stopped appearing in films, ceased online streams, didn't communicate with colleagues, and accepted no new offers from directors. Many knew she had planned to leave the industry, so they assumed she had done just that. However, even her friends and fiancé, who were very concerned, couldn't reach her. Carol didn't answer calls but responded to messages in messengers, claiming she was fine, had decided to radically change her life, and needed time for herself. To her fiancé, Salvatore, she wrote that she had contracted COVID-19, was self-isolating, and they couldn't see each other for a while. Apparently, this explanation satisfied him, as he did not raise the alarm either. A month or 3 months later, on social media, new posts occasionally appeared on her account, but she hardly interacted with anyone, limiting herself to terse and brief responses. According to the latest photos on Carol's page, she had gone on a seaside vacation without telling anyone. Parts of an unidentified body in bags were discovered on March 20th, 2022. A passerby was walking along the outskirts of the Italian community of Borno on a road along a rocky cliff. He was suddenly drawn to large black trash bags lying on the slope near a body of water. The area was scenic and deserted, so the man was annoyed that someone had decided to dump trash there. He went down to the nearest bag and tried to lift it, but it was quite heavy. The real horror struck him when he saw human fingers poking through the torn polyethylene. The man immediately reported his gruesome discovery to the police, and the responding officers found 4 bags containing a human body divided into 18 parts. The remains were so disfigured that identification seemed impossible. Forensic experts determined it was a young woman who had died at least 2 months earlier, but they could not establish the cause of death. The body had been in a freezer before someone dumped it off the cliff. Presumably, the criminal drove here, simply throwing the bags down, hoping that in such a secluded place, they would remain undiscovered for a long time. The bags tore on impact, causing some of the contents to spill out. Clearly, the criminal had done everything possible to keep the remains unidentified for as long as possible by removing all distinctive features. Pieces of skin were cut off in areas likely covered by tattoos. However, parts of these tattoos remained but were severely damaged. The skin in those areas had been burned with hot objects, cut and doused with acid. Nevertheless, by piecing together bits of the tattoos and comparing them with a database of missing persons, the police concluded that no one was looking for a woman with such features. This was odd, leading to the speculation that the deceased was not local. This remained the belief until a news report about the body was broadcasted, asking anyone who might recognize the described features to come forward. Soon after, a woman who appeared in adult films came to the station and said that based on the description of the tattoos, she recognized her colleague who had disappeared in early January. The actress mentioned that the deceased worked under the pseudonym Charlotte, but she did not know her real name. This information proved crucial, as law enforcement now knew what the girl looked like in life, and they quickly established her identity and real name. The peculiar fiancé. As soon as the deceased's name became known, it was revealed that she had gotten engaged to her colleague, Salvatore Galdo, shortly before her disappearance. Curiously, he had not reported his fiancée missing. This led to the first suspect being found and detained. However, the man was clearly upset by the news of his beloved's demise and puzzled as to why he himself was under suspicion. According to Salvatore, he had kept in touch with the woman through messengers and social media, providing their correspondence as proof. Thus, he had no idea that Carol had long been deceased. He claimed that his beloved had contracted COVID-19 earlier in the year and was self-isolating, which is why he hadn't visited her. When police asked why he hadn't called her to check if she needed help, he said he had spoken by phone with Fontana, who was nearby and had promised to look after the woman. The fiancé's story was disjointed and unconvincing, but his testimony brought a second suspect into the case who needed to be detained and interrogated. However, there was no need to search for David, as he himself turned up at the station the next day to report a person missing. The horrifying truth: Fontana obviously did not expect the body to be found so quickly, so he hadn't been following the news. When he learned that Carol had been found and identified, He became alarmed, but still believed the detectives would not track him down. However, when the police arrested Salvatore, the man realized this person would lead law enforcement right to him, as they had communicated by phone, and he had concocted a story about COVID-19, promising to take care of his fiancée. David was visibly nervous, consistently contradicting his own statements, and the story he told was highly implausible. According to him, he and Carol had been very close, but they hadn't seen each other for several months, and she had stopped making contact. He couldn't explain why he had only contacted the police now, under pressure. Fontana eventually began to testify, confessing that he had accidentally ended Carol's life. He claimed that in early January, they were filming extreme content for a client who had paid a large sum. The script required David to bind the woman, tape her mouth shut, put a bag over her head, and then brutally beat, torture, and torment her using various tools, including a hammer. They had agreed that he would not hit her with full force, but she would act as if she were in severe pain. However, during the process, he supposedly went too far, misjudged a hammer blow, and fractured her skull. When he removed the bag from her head, he saw she was in death throes, but instead of calling for medical help or trying to assist her, he, out of mercy, decided to end her suffering with a final hammer blow. Then, the criminal, allegedly in a panic, dismembered the body, but unsure what to do next, simply stored the remains in his freezer for over 2 months, before deciding to dispose of them. Reconstructing the actual events, the investigation revealed that the mysterious, perverse client was David himself, who had contacted the woman using a fake account. Evidently, he didn't want to let her go and devised a sophisticated plan of revenge because she had decided to leave him. Additionally, during the torture session, the man extracted the password to her phone, which supposedly was also part of the script and a client's whim. On January 11th, around 9 in the evening, Fontana ended the woman's life by fatally striking her with a hammer. The next day, he purchased a large freezer using the deceased's credit card, as well as a saw and an axe from a hardware store, which he used to dismember the body. He made every effort to disfigure the body to prevent identification. He removed the tattoos along with the skin, and what remained of them he tried to burn, shred, and literally erase. After that, David placed the body parts in bags and stored them in the freezer, where they remained for over 2 months. During this time, the criminal communicated with the victim's relatives and friends on her behalf, and also managed her social media, creating the illusion that Carol was alive. By the end of March, the criminal apparently thought the danger had passed and decided to dispose of the body by dumping it off a cliff in a deserted area. He hoped that the remains would either never be found or, by the time they would have decomposed to the point of being unidentifiable. However, David was mistaken, and the body was discovered just 2 days later, with authorities tracking him down within a week. Trial and verdict. The most bewildering and incomprehensible aspect of this case was that nearly 3 months after the girl's disappearance, none of her relatives or friends had reported her missing. They were all satisfied with the responses in messengers and posts on social media. Even the fiancé, who thought Carol was ill, was not alarmed by the fact that she didn't answer calls and never tried to visit her. If someone had raised the alarm, the murderer would have been tracked immediately via the signal from the victim's phone, which had been on and in David's possession all this time. At the trial, Fontana expressed remorse and swore that he loved Molly and had taken her life unintentionally. He also claimed that he had planned to end his own life after her death, unable to cope with the grief. Naturally, such a statement sounded foolish, and nobody believed him. But the defense insisted that the incident was indeed an unintentional act of violence, despite the fact that the defendant himself had commissioned the recording of the brutal video. On June 12, 2023, the court found Fontana guilty of manslaughter and sentenced him to 30 years in prison. He was also ordered to pay compensation to the deceased's son in the amount of €200,000, as well as €100,000 to Carol's mother and €50,000 to the father of her child. Surprisingly, The manner of assassinating was not deemed cruel, and the dismemberment of the body was not considered an aggravating factor, so the criminal could potentially be eligible for parole.